to standardize something as a L2 and foreign as a foreign learners also. So there will be a brainstorm. There will be a knowledgeable lectures in these 2 days. So without taking much time, I'll begin this conference by inviting Honorable Principal Dr. Pramod Ghadge sir, Principal of Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha, for his inaugural speech. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Dr. Pramod Ghadge sir, please.
Good morning. Namaste. Good morning. Respected delegates and participants from all the different states of this country, my dear friends from English language and literature faculty, I am Dr. Pramod Ghadge, Principal Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this 2-day national online conference, which is a beginning organized by Department of English of my college in collaboration with entire Satara chapters. I also take this opportunity to welcome all the scholars from Altai family, especially the president of Satara chapters, Dr. Sunil Sawant, and all others office bearers of Satara chapter Altai. This conference is basically designed and developed to introduce you to the understand the place of textbooks in English language teaching. I expect a very scholarly exchange of ideas on this particular topic, since I am of the view that the very teacher has his own unique very teaching method, where he goes behind the text, and there are some who find textbooks as a defectable tool. On one should stick to it for the best delivery of the content. So it depends on the individual teachers how he take this issue, and he should come up this his own debate with proper agreement to the prove this point of view. The conference intends to provide an insight to all the teachers to design a competent textbooks with my benefits the teaching process in the academia. I could see some things which are listed on the brochure, also designed to train you all to convert you from a teacher to a good content creator. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that by participating in this conference, we are in the right place to transform the very idea of using the textbooks along with he should get insight in designing good textbooks in respective subject. Together, let us accelerate the extent of ideas and scaling up of good participants on the basis of the discussions in this conference. I encourage all of you to attend all the session which is to be scheduled during the conference. I am confident that you will discover new ideas, fresh energy, and novel partnerships to sustain the quality of your professionally pursuit from this conference. I wish the organizing committee, the English department, Dr. Kale and Dr. Shinde, and all a very successfully conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pramod Gadge, sir. As a principal, you have always inspired your staff to take such ventures. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Sunil Sawant, sir, who is the president of Satara chapter of LTI, to felicitate the function with his welcome speech. Dr. Sunil Sawant, please.
Good morning, all of you. Today's keynote speaker, Professor Mohan Raj, resource speakers, Professor Gokhale and Professor Tripti, former principal Dr. Karande, Professor Dr. Jirange, Principal Dr. Ghatke, our Satara chapter convener, and one of the key organizers of this two-day conference, my friend Dr. Nandev Kare, other dignitaries associated with LTI from different chapters, our office bearers at the national level, teachers, researchers, students, and friends. On behalf of our Satara chapter of LTI, in collaboration with which this conference is being organized, as a president of Satara LTI chapter, I welcome you all in this two-day national online conference on place of textbook in English language teaching in India, a dependable tool of knowledge transfer. Now, just last year, we started our Satara chapter of English Language Teachers Association of India. And because of Corona pandemic, we could not come together and organize activities for a long time. But we decided to start something, accelerate something, and I talked to Dr. Kare that let us start signing some memorandum of understandings with some colleges, and let us start organizing certain webinars, conferences in collaboration with different colleges from which we have our members. And to make the beginning, I, as a president, invited chapter convener Dr. Kaya to our college and signed the first memorandum of understanding between our Janta Shikshan Sanstha's Shinde Mahavidyalay and Satara chapter of LTI. And without wasting time. After signing the MOU, I decided to organize one national level webinar. Fortunately, we had a very positive response from Professor Dr. Maya Pandit, former professor of ELT from IFLU, Hyderabad, and also Professor Tripti Korikoti, head of Department of English from Shivaji University, Kolhapur. And we organized that national webinar in collaboration with Satara chapter. And immediately after that, some 6 to 7 colleges from our Satara district approached to our chapter. And on one fine morning at Satara, we invited different heads of Department of English and other dignitaries, and we signed some MOUs. And today we have gathered here to organize this 2-day national online conference. Because of this online platform, this has become possible for that way a small college like Medha to invite stalwarts from English language teaching and English literature and language teaching, these fields, and different participants. They have been joining not only from Maharashtra but from several other states, and I see some of the participants joining from other countries as well. Dr. Kare and Dr. Shinde, they have planned very meticulously. For the last whole month, they contacted me again and again, and they contacted different scholars, different teachers across all chapters of our ELTA, and they went on preparing very minutely, very meticulously for this conference. Especially, I congratulate the principal of the college and the members of the Department of English of Amdar Shashikant Shinde College of Medha for taking this wonderful initiative and inviting all of us to join for this national level online conference. Now the topic is about textbooks in English language teaching. Of course, the keynote speaker and resource persons, they are going to speak extensively on this topic, but I would like to say something before closing my remarks, initial remarks. Now, textbook production has a very long tradition, a tradition of more than 2 centuries in our India. When the missionaries reached India along with the British officials, they started running, missionary schools, and also the British administration introduced certain schools at different places in India. And when this modern type of education began with schools, these missionaries and also British administrators, they, with the help of our pandits, our native scholars, started this process of textbook production. And we find a very wonderful tradition throughout 19th century of translating books from English, French, and other languages, textbooks especially, into Marathi and into several other regional languages of India. Along with English as a medium of instruction, we find textbooks being produced in different languages of India. As far as textbook in English language teaching in India, to limit our discussion to this topic, we find initially the idea was
unmute. Sunil sir, unmute yourself.
Somebody muted me. Sorry. So initially, when textbook production for English teaching was taken into consideration, we find most of the time the idea was prescribing passages or even plays. Shakespeare's plays used to be prescribed for teaching English. That was the initial idea, selecting passages and poems. So the entire focus was on reading comprehension. That kind of focus was there. But later on, with the introduction of structural linguistics, functional kind of approach was introduced into introduction. And with that, we find the focus shifted from transferring the knowledge of literature to language learning skills. And with that change of focus, some sort of we can say space in the textbook was provided to imparting skills as well. Okay, so textbook is not only a medium of knowledge transfer or transfer of knowledge as such, but these days textbook is seen as a medium of transferring skills, or we can say transporting skills from one section to another, or from teachers to the students. Of course, during the era of globalization and with this digital kind of revolution, uh, there is a lot of change in the idea of textbook with the arrival of e-books and so many e-things. Okay, the idea of textbook has undergone a sea change. Okay, these days, a lot of online courses are there, and a lot of teaching and learning, online teaching and learning takes place. And of course, our keynote speaker and also resource persons, they are going to enlighten us about this process of textbook production. And yesterday, I went through the list of papers, and to my surprise, Dr. Kare has succeeded in receiving, in getting so many papers from so many teachers. He had to add one more session actually. Initially his idea was organizing these parallel sessions, 6 parallel sessions, but he had to add one more, 7 session for giving space for the participants. So that way, the conference is definitely going to be successful, because we have very good scholars to enlighten us on this topic, and we have also received a great number of contributions, research contributions from so many teachers who are eager to make their presentations in tomorrow's sessions. So once again, I welcome all the dignitaries, all researchers, teachers, students in this 2-day online conference on behalf of our Satara chapter. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sawant sir, for briefing us about the events and the activities that Satara LTI chapter is engaged with. Now I'll ask Dr. Kale sir to introduce the concept of conference and regarding these 2-day engagements. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. A very warm good morning to one and all the dignitaries, respected teachers, Professor Mohan Raj, Professor Gokhale, my teacher and my guide, and what to say about him. It is everything for me, because I am sitting here or standing here in a concrete position only because of him. He helped me to improve my English. That was the basic thing. And because of his blessings, his support and his encouragement, I am where I am today. Thank you so much, sir. He is here. I'm really thankful to him. Trupti ma'am is here. Then my guide and mentor, Dr. Ashok Karande, my friend, Dr. Zirange, And obviously, our leader, Professor Dr. Sunil Sawant, Professor Dr. Satish Khadge, and all my friends from Satara district are here. I'm really happy that this event is taking place, and this event is an outcome of so many things. I'm really thankful to all those primary and secondary teachers with whom I've been working for last 11 to 12 years, and they all have been actively supporting all my activities throughout. Here, formally, I welcome you all in this two-day national online conference on place of textbook in English language teaching in India, a dependable tool of knowledge transfer. I feel honored today that we are having discourse on one of the most important topics in the teaching learning process, and the topic is the textbook. Though apparently the topic is a simple thing and of a day-to-day discussion, it is certainly not easy to be critical about a text, as we often find it our duty to deliver the content prescribed in the textbook instead of criticizing and wasting our time. I mean, we are quite obedient teachers. I don't know why, but we need to be. We criticize, we pass remarks, but avoid to put things on record. It's a common attitude to look at the text among teaching fraternity. And what to say about students? They are unaware of everything except in the cases where they are instigated to resist against some text, maybe a part of some political agenda. Because I do remember an incident in Mumbai when such a long journey was prescribed. Such a long journey, the novel by Rohington Mistry was prescribed, and there was a strong resistance, and the university was recommended to remove the text. So such things have been happening in India. But yes, there are a few teachers and scholars who dare to criticize it and want to make the changes suitable to their students. Students are their prime focus. This is because students are everything for them. I'm sure that the participants, paper presenters, and scholars present here are willing to make changes in the textbook as they love their students as much as they love their profession. Regarding the idea of the topic, let me tell you all that this idea of conducting a national conference came to my mind some 4 months back when I had a discussion with Professor Dr. Nisar Sheikh, is a local scholar. I mean, he is actually an international scholar, but he works in one of the polytechnics in Satara. Uh, his specialization is in material production, and he called me for some discussion, and the discussion was centered around different issues related to textbook. I kept pondering about different aspects of textbook production, implementation, and its impact on students, teachers, and society in general. At the same time, I was reminded of my discussion with my friend and chairman board of studies, Shivaji University Kolhapur, Dr. S.B. Bhambar. He would often say, as he's an authority now, that it's impossible to create a textbook that would fulfill all the expectations, needs, and requirements of all the stakeholders. The word stakeholder here is applicable not only to teachers and students, but also to proprietors and professionals from different sectors who hire our students, the final product. We train our students not only for their job skills, but also for their life skills. And the medium is obviously a textbook, because it is the textbook that helps us transform our ideas into, convert those ideas and try to change the lives of our students. And it is here that the textbook and its delivery play a very important role in the teaching learning process. Now, it's really a very difficult job to cope up with requirements of all these stakeholders. It is here that the complexities rise up to the surface. Again, there are several dichotomies like urban and rural divide, trained and untrained teachers, focused and general students, and so on, so many. Is it really possible to fulfill these their needs and requirements? If yes, to what extent? How? How can we transform those ideas? And this is how I could think of different themes and subthemes for this conference. I'm really thankful to Professor Mohan Raj and Professor Gokhale for helping me to transform my ideas into a national discussion textbook. And about the LTI family, I'm really happy that this is a joint venture due to the support and active participation of all my friends from Satara chapter of LTI, and support and encouragement from office bearers of LTI National and members of different chapters across India. We are a family. All of them are together here today on this auspicious occasion, supporting me as if it's their own program. That's the spirit of unity among my fraternity. I could not feel the burden of conducting this conference because they all came together to relieve me by snatching up their roles in the venture. I'm really thankful to the LTI family. And last but not least, I'm really grateful to the founder and president of Jaivat Pratishthan Humgaon, Honorable MLA, Mr. Shashikant Shinde, and Secretary, Mrs. Vaishalitai Shinde, for giving us freedom to conduct activities of academic excellence and social development through our college. I'm really thankful to our principal, Dr. Pramod Gadge sir, for his constant support and encouragement for organizing this online conference. I'm also thankful to Mr. Ashok Rao Jinnavle, Trustee Jeevan Pratishthan Humgaon, who has been guiding us on different occasions and supporting us. I'm really thankful to my colleague, Dr. Sarangpani Shinde, for executing every task assigned to him very effectively and efficiently. I'm also thankful to all the technical support providing team and all my colleagues. I'm sure that you all will enjoy this conference for 2 days. Today, the 3 sessions, and tomorrow, all the paper presentation sessions. Once again, I welcome you all on this joint venture, and hope we all together will make it a successful story. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paya sir. You are really a driving force behind establishing this LTI chapter, Satara chapter, and our final product, that is students, and we, the manufacturer, the what comes in between the text. So, congratulations for handling this very effective theme for your conference. Now, I would like to ask Vijay Ghadge sir to introduce the keynote speaker, please. Professor Vijay Ghadge sir.
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to one and all. This is my proud privilege to introduce today's keynote speaker, Professor Dr. S. Mohan Raj. I feel very elated to introduce him to everyone. Professor Mohan Raj worked as a teacher, educator at the IFLO, that is English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. He has teaching experience of more than 40 years that speaks volume about him. He has published nearly 200 research articles in national and international journals. He has also authored course books and books on teaching English. He is the recipient of Professional Teaching Award from TESOL, that is Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, in the year 2010. Sir, the major areas of interest are teacher education, materials development, and educational technology. At present, Sir is working as a visiting professor at the Netaji Subhash Open University in developing their curriculum and courseware for MA English language teaching program. So today we have with us a giant personality to deliver a keynote address. The topic assigned to Sir is textbook as a common man sees it. With this note, I end the short introduction. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Ghadge, for a wonderful introduction. I'll just take a minute to share my screen before I start my talk. Okay, I hope I have the facility to share the screen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can share it.
Yeah. Can you all see it? Yeah, I think yes, yeah. Now the topic I have chosen. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Professor Pramod Ghatge, the principal of the college, Professor Sawant, President, LTI Satara chapter, Professor Gokhale, my long-standing friend, Professor Tripti, another resource person, Professor Kale, who has been the man behind the conference, members of the organizing committee, and I see quite a few very senior members of the faculty and other delegates that have come from India, and I see a couple of them come from Thailand and Myanmar and other places. Welcome to all of you. Today, I have chosen a topic like textbook as a common man sees it, because textbook is a pretty technical product, but most of us fail to see it as a student should see it, as a parent should see it. What are some of the views that the parents and students provide when looking at a textbook? It's not necessary to have a critical linguistic analysis of a textbook to know whether the textbook is good or bad, or I wouldn't say bad, not workable, but we have to see how a textbook works just for an ordinary learner. Professor Sawant has already given a brief idea about the type of evolution the textbook had. In fact, if you go back about 100 years ago, it was simply an anthology. Why? Even about 50 years ago, when I was a student in the college, all I had was an anthology of prose, anthology of poetry, a novel, and a couple of plays, etc. But I was a BSc student. As compulsory English, this is what I had to read. But today, the textbooks have undergone a tremendous change. There is a lot of change as far as the textbooks are concerned. And let's see what a textbook is. So we'll begin with the first slide. I have a question at the top. What is a textbook? And there are two supplementary questions. How do we define a textbook? What are its components? Before I get to the statements, whatever I have written, I want to tell you a few things. A textbook, I think Danishwar Kale used the term called stakeholders. Yeah, that's a very important word when we look at a textbook. Who are the stakeholders? Parents are as much stakeholders as teachers and learners, because they are concerned about their ward. They are certainly stakeholders, and they are strong critiques of the textbook as well, because the parents look at the textbook from a very different perspective. They say, when I read, English was not taught like this. Why is English being taught like this? I have to educate the parents to tell them why the textbook has changed. There are social workers. Again, Danishwar Kale referred to the Parsi gentleman's book.
Rohinton Mistry.
Yeah, the Rohinton Mistri's novel, which is in fact an excellent novel based on a factual happening in 1960s. There was a man called Nagarwal who cheated the State Bank of India, and it's written in the form of a novel. And that novel called threw up a lot of violence. So there are social workers, activists who look at the textbook, or we have known how NCERT books are under constant pressure by politicians, how history has to be written. History cannot be written according to the whims and fancies of politicians. History has to be written according to facts. But we also have to be sensitive to some of these things. And of course, teachers and students. Unfortunately, the teachers and the students become the last part of the stakeholder. Very unfortunate. And a textbook, though it is all this, it's not simply a compilation of prose and poetry. It's a very systematic work. How a textbook is produced is an extremely systematic process. In fact, Maharashtra Textbook Board is extremely well organized, Mahabosek as it is called. It's in Pune, the headquarters is in Pune, and once or twice I was also associated with it long ago when they produced books called Yuva Bharati and Kishore Bharati. Those were the earliest textbooks that were produced in early 90s. At that time I was associated with it. So they have a very good system of producing. Maharashtra state has a very good system of producing textbooks, and textbook becomes some sort of an indispensable part of teaching. However much we like to wish it away, we simply cannot wish it away. Therefore, it has to be produced systematically, and because it is there with us, it becomes an extremely familiar product for us. Every day I keep seeing that textbook. As a teacher, I keep seeing the textbook. As a learner, I keep seeing the textbook. It becomes something extremely close to my heart. Something that is very close to your heart, you cannot describe, you cannot define. Because if you think of your mother, the whole world praises your mother. Whole world likes what your mother cooks. But you as the child of your mother, son or daughter, you don't feel anything extraordinary about your mother because she's so close to you. Textbook is something like this. Because of its proximity to us, we are not able to appreciate it. We are not able to define it. We are not able to describe it. To help us describe what a textbook is, I have just put together some 10 statements. Okay, some of these statements may be redundant. Some of these statements may be too obvious, means extremely common in parlance. However, what I'll do is I'll show you these 10 statements. Mentally or on a piece of paper, you can just say whether you agree with this or not. To keep the pace going, what I'll do is I'll resort to a more conventional method. I'll just read and probably you can think of a response. First statement I have is a textbook is a collection of lessons. It is a very matter-of-fact statement. I'm sure all of you agree with it. There are no controversies as far as a statement like this is concerned. Then I proceed a little further, make a couple of changes and say, no, it's not simply a collection of lessons. The lessons can be in the form of essays. The lessons could be poems. The lessons could be stories. Lessons could be abstracts. Okay, so if I put essays, poems, stories, or some prose abstracts, probably that will be a textbook. I have just moved one step further. Now, if I put simply a few lessons and essays and poems or stories, that doesn't become a textbook, but it's a reasonably acceptable definition. Now let's go a little further. I'll say a textbook is a tool in the hands of the teacher, which is certainly true. I'll just have to narrate a small anecdote when I say a textbook is a tool in the hands of the teacher. All of you must have heard of a man called Pitt Corder. Pitt Corder, a brilliant linguist who wrote a book called The Introduction to Applied Linguistics way back in 1973 and became a revolution. It certainly caused a bit of academic revolution. He came to India to make a survey of how English language is being taught in India. So when he came in early 70s, when he came to India, he was asked to go around the whole country to see how English was being taught. And those days, we did not have northeastern states. We had only what was called Northeast Frontier Agency, the Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, etc. Those states were not formed. That area was called NEFA. He also visited some of these areas. And when he visited these areas, he went to the schools. He found that schools did not have buildings. Schools did not have walls. Schools were makeshift schools with a few students gathering under a tree with a teacher, meeting them, more like a Gurukul. And if the weather conditions were bad, the school would have to move to a different place. And in such a place, Whitcorder said, textbook is the only tool in the hands of the teacher. If the teacher wanted to use some other material, nothing else was available to the teacher other than the textbook. So it's Whitcorder's statement. I have changed it because in India, things have improved. So a textbook is a tool in the hands of the teacher. It certainly is an instrument to help us teaching. Now, the fourth statement, here the controversy begins. A textbook is an excuse for teaching. I repeat this in a couple of other statements in different ways, which means I am a teacher. I can teach language. Whether I have a textbook or not, it's possible for me to teach language. But if you give me a textbook, maybe I can also use the textbook. I can teach without textbook, but if you give me a textbook, probably it's going to be some sort of a help. So I say a textbook can be an excuse for teaching. Okay, here is some ready-made material that's available to me. So because it's readily available, rather than prepare my own exercises, prepare my own sentences, why not I use it? So I take it as, okay, it's given. Okay. Language, it's an expansion of the previous statement. Language can be taught without textbooks. So they are redundant in language classrooms. I have already explained this. It is certainly possible for us to teach language without textbooks. A lot of language can be taught without textbooks. Of course, it needs an extremely high competence on the part of the teacher to teach language without a textbook. So I'll not go into that. That's an area into methodology. Probably some other time we can discuss that. A textbook, now this is something I have modified from a statement made by my teacher. Professor Gokhale knows this teacher, Professor V. Shashikumar, a brilliant materials producer. A textbook without exercises is like a bird without wings. Okay, Shashi always, we call him Shashi, though he was our teacher. He always used to say, if you can walk without legs, you can teach without textbooks. This is something Shashi always used to say. A textbook without exercises is like a bird without wings. Bird and wings here are symbolic. The characteristic feature of a bird is its wings. Characteristic feature of a bird is its ability to fly. And the ability to fly is facilitated, becomes possible only because of its wings. The characteristic feature of an English textbook, a language textbook, is to teach language. And teaching language is facilitated because of what we call exercises. So exercises to a textbook are like wings to a bird. This has become sort of an axiomatic statement after I made this a few years ago, but thanks to Professor Shashikumar for having inspired me to make this particular statement. Okay, so I have given you 6 statements here. There are 4 more, not very weighty statements. These 4 statements are much simpler. This is a technical. A textbook is a translation of items on a syllabus in the form of lesson. This is a technical definition. This is true. In fact, nobody can dispute this statement. If I go to a class, I have to have a syllabus. And I'm thinking of schools, even colleges. It's these days, even the college syllabus is like this. Most of the time, the syllabus we have is a grammatical syllabus. And when we think of grammar, grammar is a totally decontextualized illustration of language use. This is, sorry for making it very complex. Grammar provides me with a set of sentences that are so isolated, that don't have a context, that I have to look at these sentences only for the sake of grammar. I cannot associate meaning and grammar when I am studying a sentence in isolation. In other words, if I think of a grammar syllabus, the items on grammar syllabus, they are all totally abstract. For example, let's say S plus V plus O is a structure. Okay, subject plus verb plus object. Things like I read books. Okay, I read books, a very stupid sentence, something that came off the cuff for me. Now, if I ask my teacher in the primary school to go to class 5 and hold a whole 45-minute session to teaching SVO, how many examples can my teacher think of? Very difficult. So I have to put this structure in a context. I have to think of a tense. I have to think of some meaning. I have to weave a story around it so that my teacher gets at least 10 samples to teach. And in the garb of teaching my story, the teacher incidentally uses these 10 structures or repeats this structure 10 times, so that becomes part of my learner behavior, learners learning the language. The lesson that I write in the textbook is concrete use of language. That's the real use of language. The grammatical item I mentioned in the syllabus is totally abstract. Therefore, I call it a textbook is a translation of items. Means a grammar item gets translated in the form of a lesson. It could be a story, it could be a poem, it could be whatever it is. That's what a textbook can be. Now, this is, you can almost ignore this sentence. A textbook is a hindrance to teaching for an efficient teacher. It may not be true always, but sometimes it can happen if the textbook produced is not up to the mark, is not up of very good quality. Maybe a teacher feels defeated having to compulsorily teach a book like that. Mercifully, such textbooks are far fewer than the other type. This is something that Professor Sawant as well as Dhaneshwar Kale both mentioned. There is no ideal textbook in this world. True, absolutely. The best of the textbooks that you can write can still be made better. It's always possible, because when you are producing a textbook, you have a set of objectives. You work under a lot of restrictions. There are restrictions, and these restrictions are absolutely essential. And somebody who is reviewing the book can look beyond the restrictions that are imposed on you, totally being unaware of the restrictions, and therefore it can become better. And when we produce textbooks, when we work under these restrictions, though we can fight these restrictions, we can shrug these restrictions away, probably we do not do it for a variety of reasons. Last statement I have made here, of course, I have a few more things to talk to you about. Any textbook is good or bad. It depends on how you use it. Okay, teacher is a stakeholder. A learner is a stakeholder. Now, a textbook is a medium. A textbook is a medium that should facilitate the right type of interaction, the right type of commerce between the learner and the teacher. And if this commerce is good, if this communication is good, if this interaction is good, and if that produces language, if that produces learning, the textbook is certainly good. Therefore, I say, I am a teacher. How responsible am I as a teacher? How do I understand the textbook? Is it possible for me to make certain changes in this textbook without going outside the framework? Framework means the objectives that have been set as far as the textbook is concerned. And can I make this textbook a useful instrument, a useful thing for my learners to learn? If I can do this, a textbook becomes good. If I cannot do this, the textbook remains what it can be. So let's go a little further. Okay, and what is it that a common man looks at as far as the textbook is concerned? Okay, a common man looks at a textbook largely in terms of its components, the various types of components. Okay, first and foremost, it's the jacket and the front page. Oh, this is a textbook that's been produced for my son, my daughter, but it looks so drab. How can a child use this particular book? See, normally, unfortunately, what happens is the textbook production these days has been nationalized. Means the state governments produce the textbooks, and the state governments produce textbooks in mass, and they are also worried about the cost. Therefore, the paper used is not of the best quality. The jacket is not very glossy. The jacket is not very sturdy, and quite often it's a dull jacket. That fortunately, some of the textbook boards have changed, and some of the textbook boards are producing excellent books. Some of them are doing much better. Certainly in the Northeast, I find the textbook quality of textbooks that are produced in terms of production, it's quite good compared to some of the other parts of the country here. So a jacket is also something that attracts the learner. Okay, and another thing that happens with the jacket is all the textbooks are produced in a series from class 1 to class 10, let's say, or sometimes it could, if it's an integrated board, it could even be up to class 12. If all textbooks have to have the same design, except that the class is mentioned separately. For example, Kishore Bharati 1, Kishore Bharati 2, Kishore Bharati 3, Kishore Bharati 4, or then it can come to Yuva Bharati 1, Yuva Bharati 2, etc. Like this, if all the books have the same title, if all books look exactly alike, and it's only the number that distinguishes one textbook from the other, it can be quite confusing as far as the learner is concerned. Okay, and there are quite a few learners, a large number of learners whose parents are not educated, who have not gone to school, whose literary competence is not high, and they may not be able to distinguish one book from the other unless they can closely look at the number as well, and it's possible that a wrong textbook is picked up. So can the textbook that is produced for a particular learner be unique? The learner should feel, this is my textbook. Okay, that's the feeling that the learner should get. Is it possible for us to customize each book? Is it possible for us to make each textbook look different from the other, so that the self-esteem of the learner feels proud that my textbook is not like any other textbook. My textbook is unique. And then come to the front page, means as you open the cover, you have the first page where there are quite a few details that are given as far as the textbook is concerned. Does it tell me who this book is prescribed for? Does it give me some information about the authors, the editors, the publisher, etc.? And does it have some introduction? All these things that the child has to look for. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so the jacket and the front page, they contain the name of the book, which has to be unique. It's not simply English textbook for, English textbook for, English textbook for. If a name can be given to each of these books, okay. Now NCERT has started doing this. They have called their books Honeydew, Bird's Cry. They have given some catchy titles to the textbook. Some textbook boards are also following exactly the same pattern, but we don't know whether all the state boards will raise up to this particular thing and give a unique name to each of the book. Class and other related details and affiliation are given. Now, is this necessary? Authors and editors. Okay. For example, think of state book as Mahabosek or Maharashtra Board of Secondary Education, which also produces the textbook. When I was associated with this board, we had a person who chaired the committee. His name was Harshvardhan Khadepurkar. I'm sure many of you know him. He is from Nasik. Very hardworking. I really liked him a lot. It was a pleasure to be the editor of those course books those days. He was so very meticulous and he was quite well known. So if somebody saw Khadepurkar's name, probably somebody would feel like buying the book. They would feel confident. Okay, if it has come from somebody like this, or now I can think of Professor Gokhale. If Gokhale's name appears, I'm sure several people in Maharashtra would say, okay, we have a lot of faith in Gokhale and this book should be acceptable to all of us. And publisher, if it is a state board, then we don't need to give. But there are these days, many of the boards are outsourcing their books to be published by private publishers because of production value. That matters. Okay, Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, of course they won't do that for state boards. I'm just suggesting, except once I tell you, I was involved in producing a set of books for Goa. They were called Gomant Bharati, the very first textbooks after Goa became an independent state, and they separated their curriculum from the state of Maharashtra, and they produced the first books for primary schools, class 5 and 6. They produced what is called Gomant Bharati 1 and 2, and these books were produced by Oxford University Press. They were not, Goa did not have a textbook board at that time. This was 85, 86, around that period. Okay, let's come to the contents. Before contents, I have to talk about, before contents, I have to talk about the introduction. Every textbook should carry a very, very good introduction. It has to be written by the editors. It has to be written by the authors, because if in market there is a new brand of soap, even before the soap is released in the market, there are advertisements eulogizing this soap in all the newspapers, all the television channels, all the radio channels, everywhere. You are saturated with information about this new soap that is going to come up. It could be a soap, it could be a toothpaste, it could be a shaving cream, it could be anything. Now, unless you sell your product, unless you talk about your product, even though it is valuable, nobody will accept. Now, textbook cannot be advertised like a soap or a toothpaste or a toothbrush or whatever have you. A textbook has to stand on its own. And at least in the introduction, if you talk to the learners what this textbook is capable of doing, if you talk to the teachers on what type of syllabus it is based on, is it a grammatical syllabus? Is it a functional syllabus? Is it some other type of a syllabus called a communicative syllabus? What type of syllabus is it? If it is functional, how do I look at these functions? How do I learn to know what language use is by looking at these functions? I have to educate the teacher as well as the learner, because who is my teacher? My teacher is a poor man who has taken up his job just to earn his living. And he has so many worries about him that he does not have either the competence or the time to cope with several of the challenges the textbook can offer. Is it necessary for me? Is it not necessary for me to educate my teacher, to help my teacher a little so that this textbook becomes better in his or her hands? Okay. What are the main features? Okay. Has the textbook been divided in the form of lessons? Does the textbook have units? There's a difference between lessons and units. Lessons are discrete. Each lesson can have its own focus. But if it is a unit is thematic. And a unit is comprehensive. A unit gives you a narrative prose, which is in the form of a story. It can give an exploratory essay. It can give a small, short skit, play, or a poem, where all these are united because of a theme. It could be nature, it could be environment, it could be culture, it could be art, it could be food, it could be personalities, it could be professions, a variety of things, sports, it could be variety of things. So how have I organized this book? And if the book is organized in this manner, how should it be transacted in the class? That's something that needs to be, the teachers and the learners should be made aware of. What are the main features? And then how to use the book. Is it necessary to go about it from unit 1 to unit 5 or 6 or 7? Or if it is units, do these units become modular? Means, can I pick up a unit and deal with it independently of all other units? Or is there some sort of a cross-reference between one unit and the other? Is it possible for me to change the order in which the units appear in the textbook? If that's the case, how do I do it? If in the book I suddenly say, oh, you can use project work, or you can ask the readers to read some other story. For example, I give there is a story on adventure, and then suddenly say, read this chapter from Gulliver's Travels. This learner will not have the facility to go to Gulliver's Travels. Can the teacher bring that excerpt, the relevant excerpt from Gulliver's Travels or Moby Dick or wherever, whatever passage has been referred to, and bring it to the class and help the learners read? That's what is meant by how to use the book. And this is something very important, the last point that I've made here. There is something called time budget. It's not only the money that needs to be budgeted, the time also has to be budgeted. I have 30 weeks of teaching time, 28 to 30 weeks of teaching time in the academic year. There are 7 units in my book. If there are 7 units in my book, if I take about 4 classes per unit, I can cover all the 7 units in about 28 sessions. I'll be still left with 2 to 3 sessions, which I can use for revision, which I can use for assessment. And how do I plan my time? And is it like dividing a piece of cake into small parts so that it can be distributed? No. If there are 7 units and if there are 30 sessions or 32 sessions, I may not divide the same amount of time to each unit. Each unit may demand a different type of treatment, and can I, as an author, with some insight into how each unit can be taught, can I suggest, not mandatory, but recommendatory, can I suggest some sort of a time allotment for each unit in the lesson? That's how common man has to see the book. Then comes the contents. Contents, you have the content page. For example, from the syllabus, do I just go take exactly the same thing that's there in the syllabus and organize, develop the lessons and organize them in a linear way? Or these days, we don't give the contents in a linear manner, but we provide what is called a map of the book. A map of the book is in the form of a grid. And then on the grid, on the leftmost column, you find the names of all the lessons. And as you proceed horizontally, you find a series of columns. Each column will have a focus on what is the grammar that is being taught in the unit lesson, what is the vocabulary, what is the reading comprehension, type of reading that has to be developed, what is the type of writing that can be done, what is the type of pronunciation practice that can be given, what's the type of communicative activities that can be taught, a variety of things. I can have about 8 to 10 columns, and in the last column I can also say how much time the unit needs. That is what is called the map of the book. And if the map is given, it's also easy for me to cross-refer when to do what, and also plan out my annual plan. In schools, it's very important to have what is called an annual plan as far as teaching is concerned. For me, annual plan, the map becomes extremely helpful. Okay. I wish I could show you a map of the book, but I'm sure since all of you are familiar with the textbooks, you have seen these maps. Okay. So if I put all these things together, if I know my textbook, if I can define my textbook, if I can use my textbook in a proper way, if I have adequate guidance to use this textbook, and if my learners find what I'm doing with the textbook is useful to them, probably I have produced a textbook. And this is exactly how parents look at the textbook. This is how outsiders look at the textbook. And more than outsiders and the parents, I also want a perspective from which the teacher looks at the book, the perspective from which the learner looks at the book, to make it a fairly, reasonably good textbook. With that, I think I'll stop here. If there are a few questions, I'd be happy to respond to some of these questions. I was trying to make it as simple as possible for your questions. I've taken about 40. I thought I could take about 40 minutes. I've taken about 42 minutes. Your questions, please, if you have. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. If there are any questions, please you may ask directly to the.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat box if there are any questions. There are no questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Srinivas Chetty, assistant professor of English in Engineering College, Hyderabad.
Okay. CVR College. Yeah.
Yeah, CVR College of Engineering.
Right. Yeah.
We have president and vice president here, LTI.
Yeah, I know.
College.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful session, sir. In recent times, I think this is the first time that I'm listening to a wonderful lecture. I have a question. It's not actually a question, observation. Sir, you mentioned that a textbook is an hindrance, and then, of course, you said it is not an hindrance for all. Maybe if the textbook is not up to the standard. But nowadays, in most of the engineering colleges, at least, I don't talk about the schools and other things. It's in fact has become an hindrance because we are asked to complete the syllabus in a stipulated time, and in the process, we lose track of what exactly the students need. We are almost, focused on teaching the textbook or just completing the lessons almost mechanically. So could there be any solution for that, sir?
Actually, your question is more into methodology.
Yeah.
Completing the syllabus is a very oft asked question. Okay. Is it really necessary to complete the syllabus? That's the question. That suppose somebody asks you a question like that. Okay. What we have done is we have got so bogged down with the lesser details that a textbook is there to make the learner learn, make the learner independent. If you have a textbook, even if you cover only about half or 3/4 of it, and if you do it extremely well, so that the learner feels satisfied, this is something I can do on my own. That's the feeling that the learner should get. And if that does not become of course, with some of the average and below average students, this can still remain a problem. At this moment, I would like to give you a definition of a teacher, a beautiful definition, which I read years ago in Reader's Digest. And this definition is very beautiful. A teacher is one who, I'll switch off my video. My internet is weak. Okay. A teacher is one who's an excellent definition. A teacher is one who progressively becomes unnecessary for the learner. Means the learner should say, teacher, I don't need you. I can learn on my own. When a learner says that, I think you should feel blessed. You should feel really happy because you have made your learner independent. Now, if you can teach like this, then completing the syllabus or covering the portions, whatever it is, that does not become an essential feature. That's one thing. Second thing, in the engineering colleges, there was a change that had been made. Instead of general English texts, we had used ESP texts. In fact, I was also part of one textbook production, which was used in JNTU about 7 years ago. This was called Skills Annex.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a book called Skills Annex. That book we had tried out in a very different way. Unfortunately, only for 2 years that book was used, and later when the Vice Chancellor changed, the book was also changed. So there are other type of, these are systemic problems.
Yeah.
Okay, a textbook is not a hindrance, but there are systemic problems, and we cannot mistake a systemic problem for the weakness of a textbook. Second thing, you quoted me slightly differently. When I say a textbook can be a hindrance to a teacher, all I meant was if a teacher is highly competent, and if that competent teacher is given an ordinary textbook, the teacher may find it a frustrating experience, because this teacher can teach a lot more than what the textbook has. That's it. It was in that sense I said a textbook can be a hindrance. Okay, not the way you interpreted it. No, not at all. Don't have to feel sorry. I think I didn't make it clear.
And sir, as you said, it's a systemic problem. But I think in a way, indirectly or directly, system is in fact creating a kind of hindrance to teachers of English, particularly not other teachers, because in the process of that completing syllabus, we are losing, in fact, the interest or maybe the things that we really wanted to impart to the students. In fact, how to, I think, address that systemic issue, sir? Will there be any solution? Because we have two, just a minute, sir. We have two universities. Some colleges are affiliated to Usmania University, which
Usmania.
and most of the colleges are affiliated to JNTU. And the Usmania colleges are not actually adapting any specific textbook. They are going by, as you said, some syllabus and only reference books. So therein, I mean, there is no question of completing the syllabus, but just overview of all the topics mentioned in the syllabus. And one more, sir, before I would like to respond. This, what I call, as you said, we may not be able to complete the entire syllabus, but when it comes to the examination, they are asked questions from all the lessons. And that's where we find it difficult. We may, of course, we may not complete the syllabus, but we may do excellently well to impart our knowledge or maybe communication skills, whatever language elements. But when it comes to examination, they find it difficult, sir. You did not cover the syllabus and how to answer the questions from that.
Okay.
So these are the issues, just observations.
Yeah. In fact, what you are doing is you are illustrating the system constraints. That's that's exactly what you're doing. By giving more information in terms of specific thing. Only thing I can say is, how can we change the system? That's a question that you asked. There are two things I'm going to suggest. Probably, if the pandemic recedes and if NEP is going to be implemented, I think there is going to be a lot of change as far as the system is concerned. Because the NEP 2020 is based on what is called liberal education. And liberal education is going to bring about a massive change as far as education system is concerned. That's one. Second thing is, I can give you an example from Karnataka. There are two types of processes: top-down and bottom-up processes. Top-down process means if a textbook is produced centrally and if it is thrust on the teachers and all the teachers have to use it and they don't have a say in it, that is what is called the top-down process. And most of the time it is like that. Slowly it is changing because the textbook writers are also teachers. Bottom-up process means a group of teachers get together, practicing teachers get together. They know who their students are. They know what the needs of their students are and produce a textbook that can work with their students. In Karnataka, there was a association called FOCET, F-O-C-E-T. FOCET stands for Federation of College English Teachers. When the state government of Karnataka prescribes a certain types of books in the entire state, this group protested and they said, these books we are not going to use as teachers. And a group of teachers, about 100 teachers, they got together, they produced an excellent textbook, and they were able to convince the government, the teachers, all the colleges that the textbook that they have produced is better. That's what is called a bottom-up process. In fact, CIFL, or now the English and Foreign Languages University, when it started, the idea of CIFL was exactly to create a bottom-up process, make bottom-up process a reality. We as participants, in fact, Professor Gokhale, who is here, also knows this. We as participants, we were always told, as you go out of CIFL, you should form a pressure group. You should get together and you should form a pressure group who can influence the government, who can influence the system. So now LTI is an association. LTI is a pressure group. Okay. Is it possible for us to bring about a change in the system by making the authorities realize that there is a need for change in the system? That's something that we should be able to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your patience and in responding to the question. But it's been a wonderful session, sir. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
please. Yes, please.
I'm Dr. J. Mahiture, Principal Shinde Mahavidyalay of
Yeah.
4 Gaon, Sangli, Maharashtra. Sir, Initially, let me say thank you to you for your very nice, lucid lecture, comprehensive lecture. Uh, I'm very proud to say that Shivaji University is a pioneer in creating textbooks for students.
Yes.
And long back in the 80s, we have Shivaji University started English for communication. And
Professor P.N. Patil, P.B. Patil and others.
Yes. P.B. Patil, S.V. Shastri.
Yeah, Shastriji and Patil.
And, yes. And Y.S. Kalamkar was the man behind all these textbooks.
Okay.
And I'm proud to say that it is evolving. I mean, the evolution is going on, and we are preparing good textbooks. As I was the chairman in between 2005 to 10, I had some problems while producing these textbooks. And as the topic is related to this, that how textbooks should be prepared, produced, or we can say how the teacher can use those textbooks. So I used to say at that time, because while producing textbooks, we because of some problems, the books were not ready in time. So I used to tell my colleagues that the textbooks are, our textbooks is an excuse for the textbook while teaching our, we can say, communication skills. And I used to focus or trace on that English dailies are the fresh textbooks or an everyday textbooks for teaching our communication skills. Because nowadays, these English dailies have all the contents, the syllabus contents, we can say interview taking, narrating, description, everything is in English newspaper, and we can use English dailies as everyday fresh textbook for teaching these units. Yeah. So I found your lecture very excellent.
Absolutely.
It is I may say, the very sumptuous breakfast, intellectual breakfast for us. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Kale, Dr. Samant, and all our advisors.
No, I should thank you because you brought to my memory people like P.B. Patil. May his soul rest in peace. Unfortunately, he is no more with us. And Kalamkar, a good friend, another good friend, a contemporary of mine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And today we use a very fashionable term for using newspapers in the class called authentic materials. Okay, and I'm sure authentic materials were used. There is a question from Dr. Leena Jadhav about map of the book. Dr. Leena, I would have to mail to you what a map of a book is and explain, because unless I can show you the visual of a map of the book, I'll not be able to. You can.
I'd like to know more about it. So
sure. You can get my mail ID from Kale, Dr. Kale, or one of them, or Ujjwala also has my mail ID. One of them you can give you my mail ID. You can write to me. I'll certainly help you with that. Okay. Sorry, I'm not able to respond to it without the visuals.
No problem, sir. No problem. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, please.
Good morning. This is Dr. Shruti Tripathi from Regional Institute of Education, NCRT Bhopal.
Wow. Okay.
Sir, my question to you is that, what are the, I posted it in the chat box also, what are the issues that textbook developers in a country like India should keep in mind prior to developing a textbook? Because we see at our level, at the NCRT level, that when we come up with books, every now and then there are certain issues that crop up, some misinterpretations. So in a vast country like India, what are the requisites that we as language textbook developers should keep in mind before going deep into developing this textbook?
Okay. Were you part of Ganga Mathur's projects?
Yes, sir. We are in the same college. Yes.
Right. No, I know. Because when he took up the project, I think initially I also gave a couple of suggestions. I was asked to be part of that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just asked because that makes my job easy now to.
Yes, sir.
The thing is, first and foremost, while writing a textbook, is you have to know your syllabus. What is the syllabus based on which you are producing the textbook? And the syllabus will give you a lot of information about who your learners are and their background. So based on the learner's background, both in terms of age and the cultural background, you have to pick up the themes. And the themes have to be either created or you can borrow them from well-established writings. Having done that, you should know what is the attention span of a learner who is about 12 years old, 15 years old, etc. And depending on that, you have to prune the type of passage. And then you'll also have to see, okay, if my learner is 12 years old, what are the reasons why my learner uses the language? This is called learner needs. And if you can establish the learner needs, you have to build your exercises based on that. When you do all this, NCERT, where you belong to, NCERT also has produced a list called the list of values, values that have to be incorporated in a textbook. For example, there are quite a few social values that we have to give to our learners. And the social values can be inculcated in the learner only through a language textbook. Okay. Is it possible for you, while choosing the themes, to think of these values and incorporate them? And is it possible for you to make your exercises in such a way that they cannot be answered mechanically, but the exercises will drive you back to the passage as often as possible? If you get to see a book called English Through Reading by Prabhu and Bhaskar, that's something fantastic. A book that was produced more than 40 years ago is still a very valid book. How while answering every question, I have to go back to the lesson, read the lesson before I make sure I have the answer. Before every vocabulary exercise, before every grammar exercise, before every writing exercise, how to connect the exercise with the text is something that you have to be very, very conscious of. I think this is in brief what I can tell you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I think I have exceeded my time by 1 minute already.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Yeah. And thank you for participating.
Sir, a last question, sir. Sir, a last question.
Please.
Do organizers, do we take the last question?
Sir, I'm doing a comparative analysis of textbooks.
Okay.
Sir, I am dealing with the French language. But I wanted to know, first of all, that should we make a comparative analysis of the contextualized and the localized and the generalized textbook? And if yes, what should be the criteria of the analysis?
No, actually, if you are looking at a language textbook, it's quite possible for you to compare textbooks of two different languages and what are the similarities, etc. But you have to have extremely carefully worked out criteria. Means, are these textbooks being used by learners of the same age group? Or these textbooks being used by learners with similar cultural backgrounds, etc. Such things you can do. Okay, you have to do. You cannot compare any two textbooks. That's not possible.
Okay.
Even when you compare two textbooks for comparison. For example, I cannot compare primary school textbook with undergraduate textbook. Impossible, though it's in the same discipline. Okay. If you are thinking of a textbook in French for prescribed at class 12 level, and some other student is studying Sanskrit instead of French in the same class as 12th standard, is there a comparison between French book and the Sanskrit textbook? That's something you can do. You cannot compare other types of textbooks.
Sir, level actually I've selected, like I'm taking 2 school and 2 university textbooks and of the same level.
Same level means you can compare. You can compare.
Okay. Yeah.
For that, you have to work out criteria. You have to work out different types of criteria.
Sir, like I would like to know, like, is it the 4 competencies that I should take, or like we can have other while teaching?
Core competency
Sir,
is the major factor. Okay,
yeah,
that's the major factor.
okay. Sir, I can contact you through mail because I have a lot of queries because I'm a research scholar. So
Sure, you can. Okay,
thank
you
you.
certainly
Thank you.
can. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all the participants. Before running out of time, I would like to
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, sir.
Actually,
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Breaking. Your voice is breaking a little.
Hello.
Yeah, now we are audible.
Okay. Good morning to all. To me, this is really a great opportunity to partake in the two-day national online conference, Place of Textbook in English Language, Teaching in India. And I grab this opportunity to say vote of thanks to all dignitaries on the behalf of the organizer, Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha. First of all, I'm thankful to Dr. Pramod Gadge sir, Principal, Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay, for his excellent introduction, and Professor Dr. Sunil Sawant sir, President Satara Chapter, LTI, for his inaugural speech and enlightening remarks. I'm really grateful to Professor S. Mohanraj sir for his extensive, directional, and insightful keynote address. It was really, sir, interactive session, and the echoes of your thought will definitely roam in the conference throughout these 2 days, sir. I must say thanks to Professor Gokhale sir, my teachers and mentors, Dr. Ashok Karande sir, Professor Trupti Karikatti, Principal Mehtre sir, Professor Dr. Satish Gadge sir, Dr. Jirenge sir, for their honorable presence. At the end, I express my indebtedness to all participants across the India, teachers, scholars, and researchers, for their overwhelming response to this online conference. Again, I'm thankful to all for their participation. Thank you very much, sir.
Hello, everybody. So this was the first session. It was really a resourceful session, and Honorable Professor Mohan Raj has started from the curricula, the ideas next to the syllabus, and then the textbook, and he taken all the components right from the jackets, and he then went into the different components of the content and the grammatical elements, the language, or even the different kind of methodology and all the things. So I'm also thankful to Honorable Professor Mohan Raj, and it's time now to proceed to the conference. So it's the first session that we are proceeding to. So at the beginning, I will invite Dr. Satish Saikar sir to introduce the next resource person in the session first.
Saikar sir, unmute yourself. Saikar sir, unmute.
Okay. Am I audible now? Yes. Good morning, all. I'm Dr. Saikar SG, and I'm here to introduce the resource person for this session and also the chairperson for this session, Dr. Ashok Karande. And the resource person for this session is the eminent personality, Dr. Sridhar Gokhale. And I have this opportunity to introduce these two father figures. So at first, let me introduce Dr. Sridhar B. Gokhale. He had completed his MA from University of Pune, MLit from University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, Scotland, and did his PhD from Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad. He had worked as a lecturer at Ferguson College, Pune for 16 years. And we saw him, or right now also, we see him in Savitribai Phule, Pune University, and his roles are changed continuously, right from reader to professor, then head Department of English, and now he is teaching a course in English for scientists at the Institute of Bioinformatics and Biotechnology at Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Linguistics and phonetics, English language and literature teaching, stylistics, grammar, and teacher training are the areas of his specialization. He was awarded British Council Scholarship under the Technical Cooperation Training Program to study at the University of Strathclyde. He was awarded from University of Pune in 2001, Principal V.K. Zog Best Teacher Award. If we talk about his books and other things, he had written 10 books and 20 research articles. Let me name few notable books: Enriching Your Competence in English, Enriching Your Competence in Conversational English, and Unlock Their Future. He had produced 6 series in spoken English and 10 video lessons on grammar for ACEN Pune. He has produced and participated as a script writer and presenter in 14 educational films for the Educational Media Research Center, University of Pune. He also visited abroad and made presentations on Pune ELT project at St. Mary's College, London, and the University of Reading. He taught for 3 months at Technical University, Dresden, Germany, under the Academic Exchange Program. He conducted a workshop in phonetics at the National Institute of Education, Colombo, Sri Lanka, for the teachers of English, Tamil, and Sinhalese. He delivered a lecture to teacher trainees at the university in Mauritius. And one more thing, he is my teacher because he was visiting TC College Baramati in the year 2001-3, and I was the student over there. So I'm a student of you, sir. So I welcome you. Then let me introduce Dr. Ashok Karande, the president for this session. He is a former teacher, then former principal and joint secretary of Sri Swami Vivekanand Shikshan Sanstha, Kolhapur. He has guided 1 MPhil student and 3 PhD students. He is the founder of Shivaji University English Teachers Association, that is SWETA. He had written 3 books on translation: Vedic Dharma Sutras and Slavery of the Masses, Rajarshi Chhatrapati Papers, Dr. Bapuji Salunkhe, a biographical sketch. And besides this, he is working as a member on many committees, especially to name a few. He is a member of Sainik School Satara, member advisory board Shiva Sahyadri English Medium School Satara, governing body Vivekanand College Kolhapur. He was awarded Barrister PG Patil Award by Shivaji University Kolhapur and Barrister PG Patil and Principal Sumtibai Patil Award from Rayat Shikshan Sanstha, Satara. Besides this, he is a president of Siddhasram Trust, Satara. So I welcome both the father figures for the English fraternity
Thank you.
Dr. Gokhale sir for this presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Saikar sir, for introducing the guest, honorary guest, Dr. Gokhale sir, who is also my teacher in the Institute of Advanced Studies in English, Pune, and the chairperson of this session, Dr. Ashok Karande sir. I would like to request Dr. Gokhale sir to make his presentation, please.
Hello.
Yes,
Srinivas, is the screen visible? Is the PPT visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
May I ask Dr. Gokhale sir to make his presentation, please?
Nando, let Professor Gokhale talk first and then share the PPT.
Is there a problem?
Let him begin.
Okay, okay.
Dr. Gokhale sir.
Yes, yes.
Hello, can you see me and can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We hear you.
On the mobile phone. I think, can you all hear me and see me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Very good morning to all of you. I'm really very happy to be with all of you this morning. Principal Ghadge, Dr. Jnaneshwar Kade, Dr. Sunil Sawant, and the other office bearers of Satara chapter of LTI, my friends Professor Mohan Raj and Professor Trupti Karekatti, and all my enthusiastic teacher friends. It's indeed I'd like to begin by complimenting the authorities about this theme. I think this theme is relevant to all of us and it affects students in a very large way. Could I ask Jnaneshwar to start the PPT, please? Yes.
Yes.
Before I begin, I'd just like to make one suggestion. I'd like there to be more interaction, and therefore you are most welcome to interrupt me at any point of time and ask your questions. We can have a discussion. Of course, there will be a brief question answer session at the end as well. So please feel free to express your views. I've chosen the topic, the textbook and the learner. And Professor Mohan Raj has rightly pointed out different stakeholders in the process of teaching and learning. I think the learner is perhaps the most important stakeholder because the whole process of teaching goes for the sake of the learner. Could we move on to the next slide, please? The importance of the textbook. And something has already been said about this, but I would say that the textbook gives us the basic teaching learning material. In a sense, it is indispensable because the minimum that a teacher is expected to do is to complete the textbook. Of course, in addition, he can use a lot of other resources. He can use reference books, Students can also read recommended books. And these days, there are a lot of audio-visual materials available. But in some sense, the education system views the textbook as the basic material. It cannot be avoided. One of the reasons is that both teaching and examinations revolve around it. In most universities, most of the questions are based on the content of the text. And the student is expected to know very well the contents of the textbook. Though a little later, I'm going to suggest that examinations don't have to be based only on the textbook. Not knowledge of the textbook, but examinations should try to assess the students' competence of different types. And then there are different types of textbooks. Now, when we use the term textbook, most of us think of the textbook which is produced by a university department or the board of studies of a university. But, and we usually think of collections of prose and poetry. But let me just mention that there can be very different types of textbooks. For example, one of my teachers and Professor Mohan Raj's teacher, Professor T. Balasubramanian, has written a book called A Textbook of English Phonetics for Indian Students. Now, this book of phonetics is described as a textbook, and some universities may follow that as one of the prescribed texts for aiming. There of course can be other kinds of textbooks, and one of the types would obviously be a collection of short stories, prose pieces, and poems. Can we move on to the next slide, please? In a sense, a novel can also be the textbook if it is prescribed. Next slide, please. Yes. I'll go very briefly through this because Mohan Raj has dealt with this. What do textbooks contain? Obviously, there is some kind of content. For example, if there is a grammar textbook, there would be lessons on grammar. A lot of information is given about grammar, and usually there are exercises. So the textbook is available to us in the form of lessons to be read repeatedly. This is important. The textbook is not supposed to be read only once, but it is supposed to be read repeatedly by students so that they can master the contents of textbook. What do textbooks contain? Apart from lessons, there can be pictures, there can be maps, there can be diagrams, and there can even be cartoons in a textbook. You know, anything that initiates interaction between the teacher and the students, any type of material can be included. I'd like to mention that I was very lucky to work on a project that the University of Pune took up in collaboration with British Council. This was a project for textbook production, and we produced 2 textbooks in a span of 3 years. A little later, I'll explain to you why we needed 3 years for this project. But one of the important features of this textbook is that it contains a few cartoons, and there are questions based on that. Now, looking at cartoons or using cartoons to teach English is very, very important. First of all, they are highly interesting. No student can say that he finds them boring, and this can lead to a lot of linguistic use by students and by the teacher. We wanted the textbook to be very interesting, and one of the units was on Indian films. So we even included the review of a film which appeared in a newspaper at that time as one of the texts. I'm mentioning this just to point out that we have to go beyond our traditional ideas of what texts are. You know, many textbooks contain texts which are very boring. They need not be. They should be attractive, and they should draw students to themselves. So in our textbook, we had a unit on fashions, a unit on old people and young people, you know, whatever concerns the life of students. A textbook may contain glossary and explanations, explanation of difficult vocabulary and so on. One of the important types which Professor Mohan Raj is exercise. There must be exercises in textbooks, and I'm going to say a little more about exercises in textbooks. There can be exercises of different types, and Professor Mohan Raj referred to isolated sentences constituting grammar exercises. And I'd like to say something about this on the basis of my experience. In the textbook, in one of the textbooks that I have written, in grammar exercises, initially there are isolated sentences, sentences without any context. But soon after that, there are short passages given as exercises. Whether it's an exercise on tenses, on passive voice, there's a very, very short story consisting of just 3 or 4 sentences. And then students are asked to turn the entire passage into the passive voice. Now there is a context, and we are able to understand the passive voice in its real life context. The same happens with tenses. We teach tenses in isolation, but it's very important to think of tense sequences. That is, how can tenses be used in a paragraph? And let me mention, most textbooks ask students to turn active sentences into the passive voice almost mechanically. And students start believing that a sentence is equally good either in the active voice or in the passive voice. But there is the consideration of appropriateness, which is often neglected here. No doubt, a particular sentence in the active voice and the passive voice, both are grammatically correct. But what about appropriateness? Certain sentences are appropriate only in the passive voice. For example, on a bottle of medicine, we have the instruction not to be consumed without a prescription. Now, this is passive voice in action, not to be consumed. There's a lot of passive voice on the notice board outside your class. Students are required to pay fees in time. This is passive voice. So why not use those materials for teaching the passive voice? And, at a higher level, we had this exercise, which said, read the following sentences carefully, read the following passage carefully. Some of the sentences are appropriate in the active voice, and others are more appropriate in the passive voice. So turn only sentences into the passive, which are appropriate. So this is not a mechanical exercise. And this is a challenging kind of exercise even for teachers, because teachers and students have to think about appropriateness. So exercises can be made challenging, they can be made interesting, and they can be brought very close to life. This is very, very important. I would just like to mention that usually there are questions of local comprehension. That is, a student has to understand a few sentences, maybe one paragraph, and then there are questions based on that. But there are also global questions. That is, questions which deal with the entire passage. And this is an attempt to connect the contents of a passage with our lives. There are personal response questions, which are very, very important. And many textbooks completely ignore these. So I would suggest that different types of exercises should really be included. Could we go on to the next slide, please? I'd like to divide textbooks into 2 types. Some textbooks are ready-made textbooks and some are commissioned textbooks. And I think there's a significant difference between the two. Ready-made textbooks are all available in the market. They have already been produced by someone, one author or a team of authors. Many times boards of studies of different universities have produced these textbooks. A commissioned textbook is a textbook which a group of writers or a group of teachers is asked to write. Now, these days, most of the autonomous colleges have been trying to produce their own textbooks. Now, I would like to say, on the basis of my experience, that every autonomous college does not have to produce its own textbook. It's not necessary. There are a lot of good textbooks already available in the market. And textbook production is a very difficult kind of task. And I'll say something more about it soon. So instead of every autonomous college and the teachers in this college devoting a lot of time to textbook production, instead of that, they can concentrate more on effective teaching, effective assessment of students, and so on. So one point I would like to make, which may be controversial, is there is nothing wrong in using ready-made textbooks. If you are able to look at 50 textbooks, maybe you'll find one which suits the needs of your students. And as a matter of routine, we must not produce textbooks every time. But if we feel that all those ready-made textbooks lack something which we are looking for, then textbooks can be commissioned, and usually the Board of Studies appoints committees for production of textbooks. I'll talk a little more about the dangers and the limitations of having commissioned textbooks. We can also division of textbooks. Textbooks can be authored. I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Textbooks can be authored or textbooks can be edited. Now, when textbooks are authored, an individual writer like Professor Mohan Raj can produce a textbook, or anyone else can produce a textbook, and these are usually readily available in the market. But most of us, when the Board of Studies produces a textbook, it's usually an edited textbook. And we should understand the difference clearly. In an edited textbook, the basic passages, the basic texts are selected from authentic texts. You know, someone has written for a newspaper, or someone wrote a memo in a certain office. And if we use that, that's an authentic text. And there are a lot of merits in using authentic texts taken from outside. But the team of editors writes a glossary, they produce exercises, and they see to it that the textbook is taught effectively. So we should be clear that most teachers in autonomous colleges, they don't write textbooks, but they edit textbooks. And we should be clear about this distinction. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Let's talk about preparation of an edited textbook. Now, I have something to suggest here. I've been on the academic council or boards of studies of some autonomous colleges, and I'm saying this on the basis of that experience. The most important thing is only teachers with high linguistic and literary competence should be involved in textbook production. Now, teachers are enthusiastic. They would like to be a part of the writing or the editing team. But the most important criterion is the teacher's linguistic and literary competence. Now, we should all remember that none of us is perfectly competent in English. English is not a native language for us. We are all second language learners as far as English is concerned. Now, none of us can say that we never make errors. I've been teaching for more than 50 years, and I do occasionally make errors. But we want people who are aware of these errors and who would make sure that there is no single error in the textbook. having errors in the textbook is dangerous because students look at the textbook as a model. And if there is an error in the textbook, students might be misled into thinking that that is correct. So two things should be done. When we select editors, we need to be really careful. And secondly, a lot of peer work is involved in this. Suppose there are 5 writers in a writing team, editing team, then they should critically look at each other's writing, suggest modifications, find out errors, suggest ways of improvement, etc. That's very, very important. Textbooks produced by different universities, I do occasionally find grammatical errors in them. And this is sad. And that's why I think that only teachers with high linguistic competence should be invited to do this. I would also say that other interested teachers should be indirectly involved. Now, there are some editors or some writers, let's say 5 people. But then other teachers other than these 5 should also be involved in textbook production. And let me go back to Pune ELT project, which we had in collaboration with the British Council. What we did at the beginning of the project was we held different meetings of actual teachers from the entire area, covered meetings with teachers. And we tried to find out what the needs of teachers and students were. And we also suggested to them that if they find very useful passages, they should send them to us. So it's not only the team of writers who look for passages, but all the teachers were asked to send passages to us. And a teacher would naturally be happy if the passage he sent is included finally in the textbook. So other interested teachers play a very significant role. And my next point is trialing of the materials with real students is important. And there should be revisions and modifications in the text. What we did in Pune ELT project, this is one reason why it took us 3 years. After a few units were prepared, we got them photocopied and we went to actual colleges and we went to the actual FIBA class of that college. And someone tried to teach those materials for an hour or 2 hours. And then students were whether the text were learning, whether they think they would be able to improve their English if English is taught in that way, etc. So students were also involved. Their feedback was important. Teachers' feedback was important. The teacher who did this practice lesson, his feedback was important. So there were a lot of revisions and modifications in the text in the light of the feedback from teachers and students, real teachers and real students. A good textbook cannot be produced in a hurry, and academic council meetings. I've come across this experience. I'd like to share with you another real life experience I had. Pune University had a project called Soft Skills Development Project. And one of the activities was producing a textbook of conversational English. I was the coordinator of that. And the then Vice Chancellor asked me to come and discuss with him what can be done in this direction. So after we had some preliminary discussion, I told him about what should be included in this textbook, how we should go about it. I was shocked by one of the sentences he said. He said to me, so please write this textbook in the next 15 days. Now, a Vice Chancellor thinking that a textbook can be written in 15 days itself is reality, but something which cannot be acceptable to us. very politely but firmly, I told him, sir, the textbook cannot be produced in 15 days. And first of all, I would not like to produce this textbook alone. Though in a sense, I would be able to do it, but I would like other good teachers to be involved in this. So offhand, I suggested to him that I have in mind 5 writers. That is, 5 of us would be able to produce this textbook well, so that I can include expertise from different regions of Pune University. He accepted that, and then he again asked me, how much time would you need? I said, sir, I think to produce a good textbook, we require minimum of, I cannot produce it faster than that. The obvious reason is that all the writers or the editors are full-time teachers. They have a lot of other work to do. And this is not the only work that they're going to do. The Vice Chancellor accepted this also, to my surprise. And then we were able to produce, I think, a reasonably good textbook. In fact, there are 3 books, book 1, book 2, and book 3, different levels. We produced it within a year, and the quality of production is really very good. I think that is one of the best textbooks I have participated in writing. So everyone should remember that a good textbook can never be produced in a hurry. I've heard boards of studies and other bodies thinking of producing a textbook within 3 months, within 2 months, within a month, and so on. So let's, how much we work is not so important as the quality of the work that we put in. So even if we take longer, we a book with in all of that and incorporate the next slide. Gnandev. Evaluation of the textbook is also a very important factor. Professor Mohan Raj referred to SSC board and Balu Bharati in Pune producing textbooks. And one of the things I like very much about these 2 institutions is there is very systematic evaluation of the textbook. The textbook is not prescribed as soon as it is produced. But SSC board, for example, in Pune, they appoint a committee of 3 experts to go through the textbook in great detail, find out linguistic problems, make suggestions. Critics are given certain values. For example, does the book propagate equality, equal opportunities for everyone, gender equality, and so on? They are given a list of values, and they have to check whether these are reflected in the textbook. And these suggestions are taken very seriously by SSC board. So I find that very useful. I would suggest that the evaluation of the textbook should be conducted by the peer group as well. For example, if 5 teachers have produced a textbook, give it to 10 other teachers, those practicing teachers of English, and ask them to go through the textbook and make their criticism, make their comments and suggestions. This is very, very important. At the same time, evaluation of the textbook should be done by experts, not only teachers from the same area, but experts at the level or even experts at the international. All of us and the editors and textbook writers benefit a lot from this criticism. It's not a matter of ego for the editor or for the writer that someone criticizes my textbook. Let me say that I have learned a lot by participating in textbook production. For example, in Pune ELT project at the University of Pune, And I have also had an opportunity of working with Professor Shastri and Professor Kadepurkar. And through this participation, I have learned a lot. So it's very, very important that the textbook is evaluated properly. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Something has already been said about teaching the textbook. I have only one sentence here. The textbook must be supplemented by other materials. However important the textbook is, and even if the textbook is going to be crucial for examination questions, I think a good teacher should not restrict himself only to the textbook. Let me share with you an experience that I had when I started learning English in standard 7 in a Marathi medium school. The teacher was very good, luckily. And at that time, the government of Maharashtra prepared a textbook for these students, and we had to follow that as the text. But what my teacher did was, he also forced students, he asked us to buy another textbook, one more textbook, the textbook for the first standard in English medium schools at that time. So instead of teaching us one textbook, he taught us 2 textbooks in a year. Of course, the examination was based on only our textbook. But there were advantages, otherwise have been. And I remember that that teacher reserved every Saturday only for recitation of poems, for telling jokes in English, for telling short stories in English, etc. In the first year of my learning English. So the teacher should go beyond the textbook. He should find his own materials. And these days, a lot of effective audio-visual materials are easily available. Though I'm myself not very techno-savvy, but I feel that all of you will be able to identify such materials and use them effectively in your classroom. Could we move on to the next slide, please? The textbook and examinations. How far should the textbook be the basis for examination questions? And I would like to suggest the examination questions must not be based only on the textbook. You know, what happens usually is that if examination questions are entirely based on the textbook, there's a tendency for rote learning. You know, students try to memorize. And there is nothing great about the content of a textbook. You know, why should a student learn something by heart? The purpose, the real purpose of having a particular textbook is to enhance the student's linguistic competence. And therefore, for example, I would suggest for comprehension, passages from the textbook must be given in the examination. There should be passages of equal difficulty taken from outside, taken from real life texts. Or grammar questions should not be taken from the textbook. You know, if a student has really learned grammar well, he should be able to answer similar questions from elsewhere, or the teacher can easily make his own questions. Memory alone must not be tested, but competence of students has to be tested. Now, for many teachers, setting such questions is really difficult. In fact, whenever I'm associated with any textbook production, I suggest to the writers, not a single sentence can be taken from anywhere else, apart from passages, which we are going to use as texts. But whatever material you write must not be there anywhere in the world. You cannot take a paragraph from a book without acknowledging that. So this is very important in research, and it's equally important in textbook production. Our book available. you should design, you should make up your own sentences, your own context. And this is, I think, one of the indicators of a good textbook. So we must not test memory alone, but there should be a fair reflection of the linguistic competence of students. Could we move on to the next slide, please? And innovativeness of the textbook. This is very, very important. If you produce a textbook, if it is going to be like 20 other textbooks, why should we produce it? There's no need to produce it because we can prescribe one of those 20 textbooks and save our time. There are a lot of good textbooks readily available in the market and we can use them. So there must be some amount of creativity. In other words, textbook writers or textbook editors should be clear about one question. How is my textbook on grammar going to be different from all others grammar X? Then there's no need for me to write that. There must be some difference. And resourceful teachers are always able to think creatively about grammar or about anything for that matter. So a passionate teacher, a devoted teacher is able to think easily of creativity and innovativeness. Let me explain to you what I mean by creativity or innovativeness in the textbook. Now the exercise on the passive voice, which I talked about earlier, which says you don't have to turn every sentence into the passive voice. Turn only those sentences into the innovativeness of my textbook. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So a good teacher will always be able to think of creativity. I mentioned to you earlier that in one of our textbooks, we have included cartoons as texts. This is creativity of some kind. You know, we can look at creativity in different contexts. I'm reminded of a workshop which I held for the students of statistics in the University of Pune. It was a workshop on conversational English. And in one of the initial lessons, I was discussing with them how to introduce oneself. And then I told them they knew that usually we can introduce ourselves by saying, I'm so-and-so, or my name is so-and-so. Now this is fine. But I wanted students to exert their minds. And I said, can you announce your name without using these two sentences? Can you announce your name in any other way? Now, this was an exercise which tried to make students think in a creative way, in an extraordinary way. And I remember two students saying something different. One of the girls introduced herself by saying, 23 years ago, my parents named me Aparna. 23 years ago, my students named me Aparna. Isn't this creative? Isn't this innovative? A boy introduced himself by saying, I share my name with a famous singer. Look at the beginning. I share my name with a famous singer. My name is Abhijit. Now the second sentence was a usual sentence. My name is Abhijit. But look at the introduction. Things, even in very routine kinds of things, there can be creativity and innovativeness. And our textbook should be able to lead to teachers' creativity and also students' creativity. I would like to suggest one thing. My first suggestion is that the Board of Studies needs to conduct workshops in textbook editing. Usually this is not done. Usually what happens is we just identify 5 teachers, distribute topics to them and ask them to write the textbook. Many times it is not even edited properly because what one writer may write can contradict what another writer has written elsewhere. I've seen textbooks of this type. But we have to devote more time and we have to take it more seriously. So I would suggest that if any autonomous college wants to produce their own textbooks, they should conduct workshops for teachers. Let as many teachers join these workshops as possible, and then you can select the best of them. And there can be hands-on experience, there can be practicals of the textbook writing, and experts, those who have a lot of experience in the field of textbook writing, can guide them. Another suggestion I'd like to make is a textbook should be changed after 5 years and not 3 years. There's a tendency in most universities to change the textbook after 3 years. But if a lot of time is devoted to this activity of textbook writing, for example, in Pune ELT project, we produced 2 textbooks in 3 years. What is the point in changing that textbook after another 3 years? You know, a lot of effort has gone into that. And therefore, we should not mechanically follow this rule that every 3 years the text must be changed. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now here, I would like to thank everyone. I would like to thank all the teachers for their patient hearing. And I would like to wish all of them the best of luck and happiness in textbook production. You know, finally, the textbook writer or the editor should be very happy, and it should bring happiness to students and teachers who use that textbook. So I've shared basically my thoughts. Please a discussion on this.
Sir.
Of course, I have a few to say, but I think let me give you an opportunity to seek clarifications to make your own points. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. I am a student from Myanmar, and sir, let me know some guidelines to choose the suitable textbooks in order to meet the learners' requirements and their levels, sir.
Yes. Can you clarify what your question is?
Let me know the same guidelines to choose the suitable text in order to meet the learners' requirements.
Yes, that's right. You know, this task is difficult.
Yes.
To choose, to make a suitable kind of text for a particular group of learners. For example, let's take a rural area in India. There's a usual complaint that most students are very weak in English. They don't have sufficient linguistic competence, even if they have learned English for 12 years in school and in junior college. Now, the question at FYBA level is, how low should we go? How much should we deal with basic materials? And how should we really deal with advanced materials? Now, I feel that the textbook must not be too easy or too difficult. It must not be too easy, because if it is too easy, then there is no learning task for students. It must be challenging. But at the same time, it must not be too difficult. It must not be beyond the teacher to be able to decide whether materials are okay from this point of view. I would also suggest that if your textbook is of a fairly high standard, you might produce a supplementary textbook for weak students, and only weak students need to use that. Perhaps they need to use it at home, and the teacher can instruct those students separately, not in the regular class. We cannot ignore weak students, but we cannot lower the standard of the entire because of students. I hope, have you got an answer to your question?
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any disagreement?
Yes, good morning, Dr. Gokhale sir. I'm Ujwala Tathe.
Yes.
This might be just an observation. Actually, some years ago there was one story prescribed for FYPA optional English, and that story was Dr. Karande sir is well aware of this, and this was by Ismat Chugtai. And actually we some of the teachers objected to the inclusion of that story because it was rather bold. We did not object it because we found it very difficult to teach, but we thought that the students we are teaching should be and must be competent enough and matured enough to understand that story. Dr. Karande sir, do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And it was
Yeah.
cancelled ultimately.
Yeah, that's
Though
right.
it was a good story, sir.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, so while sir was talking about textbook syllabus designing, actually the people who are involved in it, I think should consider the understanding of the learners as well. That's all, sir.
Yeah, I agree with you. Of course, different boards of studies have different views about this. For example, many universities prescribe queer literature now or gay literature.
Yes.
Very easy to do so. But a few years ago, this was considered to be a taboo. I am not against this, but it should be done at the appropriate level.
Yes.
So we can decide whether it should be done at the undergraduate level or the postgraduate level. Because students' maturity is also very important.
Yes, maturity. Yes, that should be considered. Yes, sir.
But there should be nothing which is a part of life.
Yes, of course, sir. Actually, there is no object queer theories, or even we have certain books like last for last syllabus we had novel like Disgrace or some dramas. They were about lesbianism. So we do not have problem with that. But when we teach our students this, the students should understand the actually the wrong message should not be that is. Should not be sent. Actually, they should not take it in a wrong way. They should understand its depth and the seriousness of it. And few teachers can do this, but I don't think the teachers must be very competent enough to teach such texts.
Yes. So teachers can cooperate with one another and discuss these issues. This reminds me of another thing which I would like to mention. Usually we prescribe only canonical literature, but I think some amount of popular literature should also be prescribed.
Yes, sir.
You can think about this.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Any suggestion, any disagreement? We learn a lot from disagreements.
Sir, from your question.
Yes.
And you mentioned about the creativeness and innovation of the teachers beyond textbooks, sir. So what are included beyond textbooks? Let me know about this.
Yeah, I mentioned a few things which are included. I would say now there is no harm in including audio-visual material as a part of the textbook. You know, most colleges have computers now, and material need not be only printed. You know, even audio-visual materials can be included as a part of the text, possible, and which will make our teaching very interesting, and it will bring students nearer real life. You know, a teacher should constantly think, what can he do? What new things can he do in order to give that linguistic competence to our students? You know, this being different from others is very, very important in today's world. You know, if I'm a good teacher of English, I must be different from all other teachers of English in some way. And I should strive to do that. And, you know, there are different ways possible. If we have this passion, you know, we go on thinking about this all the time. We go on thinking about this for 24 hours.
Thank you so much for your kind explanation, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure answering your question. Anything else?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your enlightening this lecture. Professor Gokhale was a former head of the department in Pune University. He can be described as a grammarian, linguist, especially a synthetician, who has dealt with the text as intersemiotic experience. Of course, language is a semiotic system, but he went beyond that and accommodated film as a text, cartoon as a text. He has also mentioned, given some ideas regarding we have to cite the things, we have how to refer something if you wish to take from the other sources. He has also explained something about audiovisual and some other supplementing material. He has also mentioned that you should be beware about the plagiarism and avoid copying the material. So, and many suggestions. So thank you so much for all these suggestions and this resourceful lecture. Now I would like to invite Honorable Dr. Ashok Karande sir, former principal of the college, for his presidential remarks.
Karande sir, please unmute yourself. Please unmute.
Yes. Good afternoon to everybody. I hope you hear me.
Yes, yes, no problem.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Good afternoon to everybody. And I'm very happy to be associated with this venture launched by Dr. Kale, Yaltai Chapter Satara, because the very issue taken up for this conference has been of utmost importance. And another thing, I should be thankful to Dr. Kale and his colleagues, because of this, I've been able to see Professor Gokhale and many old friends of mine who have been associated with this, joined this conference. Professor, particularly Mohan Raj, Principal Gadge, Professor Karikatti, Dandev Kale, Sunil Savant, and many friends who have joined this conference. I'm very happy to see them here. When it comes to Professor Gokhale, as all of us are aware of this, that whenever it is Professor Gokhale, he is a solution to many questions which are there already in minds of teachers of English. So the topic that he dealt with, textbook and the learners, So in itself, it's so explanatory. That is the very important factors in teaching and learning. That is textbook, the teacher, and the learner. And out of these three, the textbook and the learner, these are of utmost importance. Professor Gokhale has given us the whole list of do's and don'ts in creating a good textbook. What must never go into a textbook and what must go into the preparation of textbook, in creation of a textbook. Very often we say that it's making a textbook or producing a textbook. But when we hear to the experts like Professor Gokhale, this preparation or a making or producing textbook, we need to go much ahead of it. So in a way, I would say that instead of calling it producing a textbook, creating a textbook would be more appropriate a term. So creating a textbook, it involves in it a lot more when we look at a textbook. And so all the suggestions made by Dr. Gokhale as to what should go into, what the textbook should contain, and that was very revealing in a way. It has always been insightful presentations given by Dr. Gokhale, and even this presentation was full of insights, full of explanations, full of inspiration to all the teachers. Because very often it is thought that the textbook for the higher learning or in higher educations or the higher learners, that should only be in the form of the running text. But use of maps and cartoons and two-dimensional, even audio and visual material, so that is as essential as the text itself, as essential as the passages and poetry itself, or even what we say, this a kind of textbook, So this has an additional dimension because textbook is written not for the teachers. It is prepared, it is created for the students. So no textbook can be produced or created losing sight of learners. So learner has to be at the very center when we think of textbook or when we try to create a textbook or produce a textbook. And so from the point of view of learners, so the suggestions made by Dr. Gokhale, they are of a great significance to the teachers, even to the textbook producers. Because when it is a text, when it is a textbook, the learner and the evaluation, these are the two things which needs to be focused more. Because without evaluation, that is examination. Without evaluation, neither text is justified, nor the existence of students or the role of students is justified. And for this reason, the presentation given by Dr. Gokhale regarding textbook and the learner, it was very revealing, it was very insightful, it was very helpful for teachers of English and even for the textbook producers. So once again, I would thank Dr. Gokhale for giving his presentation, because Gokhale has been known not as a theorist, not as just a pedagogical expert, but he is known as a realist, as a practical solution finder. So whatever may be the issue, but the solutions he has, because he thinks of everything. He thinks of textbook, he thinks of learners, he thinks of curriculum, he thinks of the whole system of education from the practical point of view, from the, again, we can say, angle of learners and the students. And so whenever he talks, whenever he speaks, he has we can say the practical approach. And this practical approach makes things easy for the teachers and even for the learners also. So I'm very happy to be associated with this conference, this webinar, and again, very happy to be with Dr. Gokhale and organizers and other participants who joined the conference. Once again, I thank the organizers, Dr. Kale, Dr. Sunil Savant, Ujjwala Tate, Dr. J. Mehtre, Satish from Karad, and many others who participated, who joined and enjoyed these two sessions. The first keynote address by S. Mohan Raj and another session by Dr. Gokhale. So thank you to the organizers and to all the participants here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karande sir. The journey of the tech production to creativity has beautifully been summed up by you. Now I would like to request Suryakant Adate sir to propose the vote of thanks, please. Over to you, Dr. Suryakant.
Good afternoon to all. I feel honored and privileged to get an opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this two-day national online conference on place of textbook in English language teaching in India, a dependable tool of knowledge transfer. It is indeed a very memorable day as the resource person, Honorable Professor Sridhar Gokhale sir, former professor and head Department of English, Savitribai Phule Pune University, is with us for the chief guest of this two-day national conference. I, on behalf of LTI Satara chapter and Department of English, Amdar Shashikant Shinde College Medha, convey deep regards and heartily thanks to you, sir, for gracing the online conference and sharing with us your vision. We are greatly encouraged by your gracious presence and immensely benefited by your inspiring speech on the textbook and the learner. Your valuable speech was really an intellectual feast for us and which will be very useful and fruitful. I also wish to express my deep sense of gratitude to Honorable President Dr. Ashok Karande sir, former principal and former Joint Secretary Swami Vivekananda Shikshan Sanstha, Kolhapur, for his extending time and presidential remarks to grace this online conference. My special thanks to Honorable Professor Dr. Sunil Savant sir, President Satara Chapter LTI, and Dr. Pramod Khadge sir, Principal Amdar Shashikant Shinde College Medha. Thank you very much, sir. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Satish Saikar sir for introduction of the speaker and the chairperson of this session. I also my sincere thanks to my friends and head of the English department, Dr. Gnaneshwar Kale sir, his colleague, Dr. Sarangapani Shinde sir, Dr. Arvind Sadhav sir, and Srinivas Pawar sir. I convey thanks to all the distinguished delegates, student participants, conference authorities, scholars, invitees, and well-wishers for making commitment to this conference. With the prior permission, I conclude the vote of thanks of the first session of this two-day national conference on the place of text in English language teaching in India. Thank you very much.
Hello again to everybody. And now we have to move to the session 2. it's really a serious deliberations going on, and it's a momentum created by Honorable Professor Mohan Raj, which was maintained by Professor Dr. Gokhale, and now we are leading to the session second. So I would like to invite my friend Dr. Tanaji Kamble to introduce the resource person in the next session. Dr. Tanaji.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible? Hello, sir.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, being a member of
Sir,
LTI
unmute
chapter Satara.
yourself.
Yes, sir, it is done. Hello. Hello, Saikar sir.
Sir, you are audible.
Hello.
Please continue.
Yes, yes. Okay, so my friend Naneshwar Kale has assigned me a job to introduce today's resource person and chairman of this second session. So, friends, I'm going to introduce the resource person of this seminar. So today, the resource person is Professor Dr. Tripti Karikatti. She's a professor and head in the Department of English, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. She has 20 years teaching at her area of specialization is applied linguistics, sociolinguistics, drama, and gender studies. She has visited foreign countries like Taiwan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Czech Republic, France, and Germany for academic purposes. Her Google Scholar Citation Index is 92, H Index is 4, and I-10 Index is 2. Till today, she has undertaken 4 major research projects funded by UGC and ICSSR and Shivaji University. Under her able guidance, 8 research scholars have completed PhD and 3 students are in progress. Also, 6 researchers have completed their MPhil. She has published 45 research papers in national and international journals. She has presented 8 papers in international seminars and conferences and 10 papers in national conferences. She has been a resource person in 9 conferences of national and international repute. Her translation of a radio play entitled Photo Babu was awarded second prize at the national level by All India Radio. On behalf of Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha and LTI chapter Satara, I warmly welcome Dr. Tripti Karikatti madam in this 2-day national online seminar. Welcome, madam. The chairperson of this 2-day online seminar is Professor Dr. Rajaram Jhirange. He's a professor and head in PG Department of English, Yashwantrao Mohitte College, Pune. He has 35 years teaching experience at UG level, 90 years at PG level, and 15 years of research experience. His area of interest is British literature, postmodern literature, science fiction, Indian English literature, ELLT, and linguistics. He has been editor of 32 books and has published 32 papers and presented in 21 papers in national and international conferences. Under his able guidance, 5 candidates have completed PhD. He has been recipient of Best Teacher Award of 2011 given by Municipal Corporation of Pune. He was the chairman, coordinator, and member of UGC's Bharat Swachhata Mission verification team that inspected 2 state universities, 3 deemed to be universities, and 8 affiliated colleges. He was the chairman of Board of Studies in BVDU Pune, an expert member BOS in Shivaji University Kolhapur. So he's such a stalwart person we have with us today for these conferences. So on behalf of Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha and LTI chapter Satara, I warmly welcome Dr. Tripti Karikatti madam and Dr. Rajaram Jhirange sir for this conference. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ambedkar, for introducing the guest of honor, the speaker person and the chairperson of the session. Now, I would like to request Dr. Tripti Karikati Madam to make a deliberation on textbook in a language class. Depend on it or teach it. Over to you, Dr. Karikati Madam.
Thank you very much, sir. I thank the college, the principal, Dr. Nandev Kare, Dr. Sunil Sawan, all the members of LTI of both the chapters Satara and Medha. I also thank the chairperson, Dr. Chirangi. And with your permission, I'll start with a presentation talking after two stalwarts whose great experience has reflected in the extensive and comprehensive information loaded talks that they have given. I want to make some points which have not probably been made there. So without wasting much time, let me go to the presentation. Is the slide visible?
Yes,
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Please
So the title comes from Depend textbook in a language classroom, depend on it or ditch it. Some years back, there was a book by Matt Miller, ditch that textbook. So I feel that these two, let me make this thing clear at the very outset. Textbook is an essential thing, but the complete dependence on it is one end and ditching it completely is the other end. So avoiding these two ends, we have to reach some kind of compromise between the two, the best possible means for this. So the first term that we have taken, textbook, a lot of things have already been said in the two lectures earlier. If we look at the materials on this particular area, instead of the term textbook, the preferred term is course book, and course book is of course a textbook which provides the core materials for a language learning course. It aims to provide as much as possible in one book and is designed so that it could serve as the only book which the learners necessarily use during the course. Such a book usually includes work on grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, functions, and the skills of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So all these things, from the grammatical part to the skills part, all these things are bundled into one, and that probably is a course book. But sometimes this is not the whole view, and instead of using the course book, we should actually be thinking of the whole language learning materials that are used. Actually, a teacher may use anything in the classroom which is purposefully used to impart some kind of training or practice or exposure to language. And this would include maybe workbooks and cassettes and CD-ROMs, video, YouTube clips, photocopies, books, newspapers. So there is a huge range of this. And let's look quickly at the huge range which can be used. And we have got some examples of this. Professor Gokhale has used this in some of the textbooks, and Professor Mohan Raj also has talked how they have incorporated them in their the textbooks that they have produced. So starting from videos, DVDs, emails, YouTube, dictionaries, grammar books, readers, to even the discussions that learners have with each other, which may have some erroneous language also. All these things have been used by teachers all around the world as learning materials, and to give a pretext, to give an opportunity to the learners to start talking, to start using the language, and then learn something from the use. So actually, what is this materials part? It is anything which is deliberate. So the word deliberately used is important here. We are using different kinds of texts. They could be written text, printed text, they could be audio text. But these texts are meant to improve learners' knowledge, or it could be the experience of the language. Now, when we come to the, I'm sure all of you have gone through all these things, but I'll just remind you what Tomlinson, a person who has written very extensively on language learning materials, says about this learning materials is, these materials have at least 4 functions. First thing, they are instructional. What does that mean? They inform the learner about the language. Then they are also experiential. They give experience. They provide the exposure to the language in use. They are elicitative. They stimulate the learners to use language. And last of all, they are exploratory. They facilitate discoveries about language. They are encouraging the learner to use the language and find out for himself or herself in what ways it can be used, what things have to be kept in mind, what changes have to be made, and how this language has to be tweaked when it is being used in real life conversation. Now, coming to the major part, all these things we have already seen, so I'll not go into that. What I intend to look at here is the role of the teacher. So who writes this teaching materials? And we have seen in the earlier lectures also that all over the world, it is the teachers who produce lots of teaching materials already in the classroom. So they should be, and they are in fact the best people to produce the teaching materials. And then the publishers approach teachers. Sometimes they are commissioned, sometimes one person is approached, and then he or she ropes in other people, and textbook writing, materials production starts. Now, if teachers are already spending a lot of time in each of their class, beginning from the very first class that they start as a teacher, if they are using lots of materials, then why not write a course book, publish a course book or a textbook, and see what kind of, how useful your ideas, what has helped your learners, whether these ideas would be helpful for others also. So most teachers, they keep on, when they're using someone else's textbook or materials, they adapt these materials. And what is exactly material adaptation? It is making changes. Sometimes you may have to add something. Sometimes you may have to reduce something. Sometimes you may have to omit something. Sometimes you may have to supplement the things. Sometimes you may just need to change the order. So you may not agree with the order. You may sometimes feel that the text or the exposure which is given to the grammar part or the skills part is not sufficient, and so that's why you want to add something. You want to use your own materials there. So the teacher must understand that they are the materials developers. Maybe what they have produced, what they have created has not yet been published. It has not been used by others, but they are in fact materials producers, and they are ultimately responsible for whatever materials that the learners are going to handle. So it's their responsibility to check that this material which is already present in the textbook is sufficient or not, and if it is not, then how to adapt this material so that the needs of their learners are met. How this pertains to all language teachers. I am not just saying this, or these textbooks are not saying this. Let's look at some of the textbook writers, the materials producers, and the most famous of this person is David Lunan. You must have heard of his name. We have learned some parts of David Lunan's research articles and books in courses on applied linguistics and English language teaching. He has written more than 100 scholarly books and research articles. He is a teacher, educator, and his research is focused more on classroom-based research and a task-based approach, using especially the communicative approach in the classroom. And one of his books, Go For It, this has sold 3 billion copies so far. So he has been a very, very successful materials producer also. So what he says in one of his interviews, I got into materials writing in the late 1980s by being invited. first by Cambridge University Press, then Henry Thompson, which is now National Geographic Learning, to demonstrate how my theories on learner-centeredness and task-based language teaching might work in practice by writing an ELT textbook series. So a person who has been producing theory and writing books to teach what is materials production, when he is invited to write an actual textbook for a ELT textbook series, what was his experience? To date, I have written about 14 series for a wide range of publishers. Each series posed its own challenges, and it took me years to learn the tricks of the trade. So David Noonan is saying something I absolutely agree with what Professor Gokhale said, that we need to have very, very experienced, trained, not experienced in the sense how many years have been put into teaching as a teacher, but the kind of training the teacher has got. This is very much essential. If Noonan had, it was not easy for him. It took him years to learn the secrets of the trade, tricks of the trade. So we have to be very, very careful. The second person I would like to refer to is Claire Walsh, who has also written many textbooks for Cambridge and IELTS and Pearson ELT. I had done some materials development for my own school and classes, but writing for others was very different. That meant starting small and a lot of early starts, writing before the teaching day began. Because when we are using the materials in our own classroom, then we are thinking just maybe one day ahead or just a week ahead. And then we can adjust, we can adapt what we are going to use, looking at the way it is being received by our own learners. But when we start to write for a general population, then it is different. We have to start it early, and it begins much earlier, as you have heard Professor Gokhale and Professor Mohan Raj telling. Sometimes it takes 3 years, 4 years to complete this thing. I was able to write things like grammar lessons from teaching experience. So that part was easier, writing grammar lessons. But there are rules for putting together interesting and effective listening or reading tasks. So that is the difficult part. Listening, reading, and other skills also. I had to learn that skill. So it's not an easy task. Why am I referring to these experiences? And you would ask me, why am I referring to all these interviews which alert the teacher that it's not easy, it takes time, because I want all English teachers to try this textbook writing materials producing. The third writer, Amanda Davis. Like all teachers around the world, I have been creating my own materials since my first day in the classroom. From small alterations to tweak existing activities to creating lesson materials from scratch. It's imperative that teachers ensure the things they do in the classroom are tailored to the needs of their particular students. This is very, very important. We have to meet the needs of our students, and the textbooks that we are writing. It could be the textbooks produced by the BOS of our own university, or the commercially produced textbooks which are available, which are actually flooding the market, produced by big publishers like Cambridge, Oxford, Pearson, and Collins. Name there are hundreds of names there. So all these they do not know the exact needs of our group of students. Making the jump from creating for my own students to a more universal context was an important learning experience. So this learning experience, if these people who have been successful have taken some time to learn all these things, so it means that we will also have to put in some efforts. We will have to get some training, and but it doesn't mean that we should stop and we should just start adopting textbooks produced by others. When we come to India, we find that when compared to the European and American situation, very few teachers are into textbook writing or materials production. Much of the work that is being done, especially for the commercial producers, it is being done in Hyderabad. IFLU is involved to a large extent. Pune is involved. Professor Gokhale has been involved. But when we come to the smaller universities, state universities, we find that it is the BOS which has been doing, and otherwise a few teachers are involved in this textbook writing, even by the separate BOSs of different universities. But what about the individual teacher? Here I have to regretfully say that most of the teachers use the textbook as it has been produced without adapting it, without keeping in mind the needs of our learners. Using textbooks prepared by someone else, it is never satisfactory. Now, when someone else is preparing the textbook, uh, has some different kind of plan in mind, and uh, that person is entrusting you with his or her lesson, and you have to think of what could be that person's perspective behind the way the materials have been produced, the way they have been presented, put forth, and sometimes this is not very successful. But just it is also the other way around. The textbook writer is also troubled with the same idea that I am producing for someone else. Someone else will be using my materials in the classroom. This is someone else's lesson. Actually, the lesson belongs to the teacher who is conducting the class. It is his or her lesson. And then the textbook writer is also worried by this idea. Will that person be able to use my approach, or will I be able to satisfy, meet all the needs of that person's students? And whenever you are writing a textbook, you have to learn that people are going to do what you have actually produced. It will be used in different ways, and there is always going to be negative feedback. So if we look at the comments earlier, Professor Mohan Raj talked of such a long journey, and my friend Ujjwala Tate talked about Ismail Chuktai's stories. So we have to be aware that there is going to be negative feedback. No textbook is going to meet everyone's perspective. Chuktai's story was selected by UGC. It came from that syllabus, and probably it is suitable. They thought that it is in metropolitan cities, the learners are mature enough to cope with this kind of text, and teachers here in cities like Kolhapur and Satara and Sangli felt otherwise. But we also have to remember that sometimes through textbooks we could be making our students more mature. So it's not just one way around that we wait for them to become mature and then we introduce something. It may also happen, and we are going to look at this. I'll talk about this in a moment. Sometimes what is presented in the textbook is very much different from the actual reality. So it's not the case that only metropolitan learners, students, are exposed to different kinds of sexualities and gender differences and hierarchies in the society. And when we are producing textbook, because our focus is on language and grammar and all other things, so are we reducing the content, the reality, so that we can avoid controversies? So we need to keep this thing also in mind. Anyway, coming back to my mind, we have to remember that there is always going to be negative feedback, but that shouldn't discourage us. Teachers should take up writing textbooks, and it may not be the textbook that is which gets published and reaches all other universities and all other colleges. It could be materials for your own learners. At least that each and every teacher will have to start. Our teachers need to get more involved in textbook writing to suit the needs of their learners, the needs of Indian context, and secondly, more importantly, so that we can use authentic materials. So a language which is actually used in real life, not a language which is written by the textbook writer. Now I'll talk about some advantages and some disadvantages of using textbook made by others. It could be any kind of textbook. Gokul sir has talked about the different kinds of textbooks. So from the perspective of students, a textbook certainly has some advantages. Like it is providing you with input. And for a student, especially think of a student who is learning on his or her own, in a situation like this pandemic situation, or a distance learner, sometimes the textbook is the only source of exposure to the language. It is the only means of contact with language. And for that kind of learner, maybe in some rural part, some a part where there is no internet connection, and we have to remember the digital divide in India. So for these learners, the textbook could be the only source of input. It could be the only source of practice, the only source of exposure and contact with English or any other language for that matter. Secondly, these textbooks they come, especially the commercially produced textbooks, they come in a very attractive and appealing manner, colorful textbooks. And think of the textbooks that we used when we were in school, SSC board textbooks, and today the books that my son uses, produced by Cambridge and Collins, they are so colorful. Paper quality is good, glossy paper is used, and not just for that matter the form, but even the content has changed a lot. So the textbook has, of course, some advantages for the students. From the perspective of the teacher also, the textbook has some advantages, like it provides the teacher some ready-made ideas regarding how to conduct the class, how to plan the class, how to pace the class. Sometimes even the order is decided, and the teacher can just follow from the beginning to the end. The same order could be followed. And every textbook, in the preface, in the introduction, the textbook writers who have taken so many efforts, sometimes they have put in years together, they give indications regarding how to use these textbooks, and this is of course well thought of. So this comes as something is very helpful for the teacher. Secondly, the textbooks also provide some kind of standardization. So we had this question in the first session. Osmania, the colleges affiliated to Osmania University, and other colleges. So in situations of this type, the students are learning the same kind of things. We need some kind of standardization. So that is done if you have one textbook which has to be studied by the learners. So it becomes easier to evaluate the learners at the end of the course also, and also to evaluate the course also. So in terms of accuracy, standardization, quality material, all these things are taken care of by the textbook writers. So it's going to save the teacher's time. And this is true. The teacher, if the teacher is thinking about materials to be used, then teacher has to not just plan and decide how I'm going to teach these things. The teacher also has to provide for what is to be taught. So if you are using a ready-made textbook, then you have what to teach, and you just have to think on how to teach these materials. So these are the advantages. But let me also talk about some disadvantages. When the textbook is made by someone else, it could be a textbook made by Cambridge, or it could be some literary text prescribed, whole literary text prescribed in as in case of Such a Long Journey, or the short story. Or it could be a textbook produced closer home by your own university's BOS. These textbooks may not always meet the needs of your students. So you know the needs of your students the best, and so it is essential that if you find a discrepancy between the standard which is set by the textbook and the standard at which your students actually are, they could be better than that, they could be lower than that, whatever it is. So you will have to take care of that, and you need to provide some supplementary materials. Second, these textbooks may not use authentic language. They may not be representative of the real language which is used. Now the problem is solved to a large extent, because much of what is included in these textbooks is Indian English. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't expose our students to American English or British English for that matter. So different Englishes have to be taken care of. And if the textbook is not able to do this, then sometimes it could be the teacher's responsibility to do these things. The third thing, a very important thing which I referred to earlier, the textbook may be far removed from the context. It could be an idealized kind of situation. It may not be representative enough of the complex social structure of the society. So it may not be, we are trying to, because we don't want any controversies. We know that when we have textbooks and when we prescribe all these things, such a long journey was such a big experience for all the teachers, especially university teachers. So I was surprised when this controversy came up. And I thought it is so less critical of the ruling parties, and definitely the people who are opposing these texts have not read the text. And if they had read Midnight Children, then what would they have said? And Midnight Children was prescribed in Shivaji University for such a long time, and no one opposed. It said, it referred to Indira Gandhi as the widow, the witch, and then no one had a problem, because most of the times the people who object to this text, they do not know the text close enough, and someone instigates them and they just want to create a political controversy. So to what extent the teacher, the textbook writers, the materials producers should give into this kind of pressure from the political, not exactly parties, but the different pressure groups in the university. So isn't it time for us to take a position here? If we are sure that our students need this kind of language, and it's not doing any kind of injustice to certain sections of the society, then what's wrong in exposing them to this kind of writing? So we need to think about this at some time. Sometimes the textbooks may not be coming to the next disadvantage, especially the textbooks written by the state boards. They may not be attractive, and if it is written by a state board, and sometimes they could be very attractive, but they could also be very expensive. So our students may not be able in a position to purchase this expensive textbooks or materials, and sometimes they may not be, they may be cheap, but they may not be attractive. So in both the cases, the teacher, it becomes the responsibility of the teacher to provide something more than what's available. So the biggest problem I feel, the disadvantage that I see in using this kind of textbooks and depending on the textbook in the class, is that this textbooks may make the teacher too dependent on them. Teachers may forget how to produce their own teaching materials. They may get into a habit of never thinking about what to teach, because they are already getting what to teach, and they just have to think how to teach. So sometimes they may forget that they have learned sometimes, and they have used this skill of what to teach and then how to teach. The skill may be not used for such a long time that they will forget the skill completely. And how to plan the things, how to execute the things, uh, uh, how to make the materials that the teacher has come up by himself or herself meet the needs of the students. All these things could be forgotten at some time. So this I feel is the greatest disadvantage, and that's why I said going to the extreme of depending completely on the textbook is very problematic for us as teachers. We need textbooks specific to our needs. Teacher is the best person to produce such teaching materials, and then if I know my learners the best, and if I have the competence to produce teaching materials, then why not think about this? So efforts have to be made in these directions, and these efforts will have to come from not just the teachers, but English departments, BOs who produce textbooks. Dr. Maitre sometime back talked about this. Shivaji University English department has been producing textbooks. So when we were preparing for our NAC latest round, I investigated, I searched for old documents, and long back in 70s and 80s, I found that of course the department has been involved for at least 3 decades. It has been involved in textbook writing, but I found that actually these things started much earlier in Dr. Desai's time, and British Council had arranged some rigorous training. So the first textbook writers went through some rigorous training. We still write textbooks. That tradition continues, and it is a good thing. But this training part is missing, and I feel it shouldn't be the case. we should have training workshops, very, very rigorous workshops. We should be calling in experts who have done this, and experts not just in the sense that they have the theoretical knowledge like I have, but practitioners like Professor Gokhale and Professor Mohan Raj and maybe Professor Maya Pandit, who was instrumental at that time in using communicative approach. And I heard that at that time people were not very happy in using the communicative approach. So we need to have more training workshops, and we should call in British Council and other maybe even publishers also. So the second question is, then why just stop at writing course books or textbooks? Why not focus on whole materials production? Now, in time of corona pandemic, and even slightly before that, I see many teachers, especially those who are teaching in professional colleges, many teachers are coming up with their own YouTube videos on videos teaching, producing different kinds of materials, audiovisual materials, to meet the specific needs of the learners. And these are very good kind of videos, and sometimes they come up with printed material also. So we need to focus on different kinds of material materials production, and teachers should be trained. There are now being some workshops being organized on how to use MOOCs and how to use Moodle and Swayam and all these platforms. So we need more these kinds of workshops, but they have to be very much hands-on kind of workshops, where each teacher will get sufficient time, and there would be an expert to look at these things and guide the people, guide the teachers regarding what things can improve their material. So this kind of one-to-one training is essential. Now, let's look at how is this process. So I have already talked about a few people, what they have said, who write textbooks. Now let's look at what they have to remind the teachers. I'll not read all these quotations, but I'll tell you that most of this textbook writers, whether it is Claire Walsh or Ken Beatty or David Noonan or Dubika, they tell that it takes time, and it's always good to write your own materials. And the way, if you are ready with some kind of materials, or if you want to enter this industry, then publishers already have a list. For example, you wish that Cambridge should publish your materials that you have written, then the publishers already have some ideas in their minds, and these ideas, they have a plan which is going to run on for the next 5 years, 10 years, and so on. So even if a teacher has a new idea, it's not very welcome with the publishers. So the teacher should find some other way of approaching the publishers. Secondly, David Noonan cautions the new writers who want to enter this field of professional textbook writing, course book writing, that today there are many more aspiring writers than possibilities of getting published. So publishers have their own plans, and they are booked for many years to come. So it's not as lucrative as it was once, but this is a condition he is talking of the West. I feel still there is scope in India. Almost every month, Professor Gokhale will agree with this. Publishers approach the BOS chairman, chairperson, or the head of the department, saying that if you are revising your syllabus, let us know. And if you are not happy with what textbooks or what we have already available, then you can commission us, and we will produce the textbooks for you. So I feel this is the right time for our Indian teachers, especially teachers from smaller towns like Sangli, Satara, and Kolhapur, to think seriously about this thing. Another important point with which I would like to end is how is the evaluation process. It is not enough only to write a textbook. It is very essential that the textbook is evaluated. Professor Gokhale talked about it to some extent. I'll just add to what he said, that after the textbook is written, it of course is evaluated, and the evaluation happens at 3 stages actually. The first stage is pre-use. Before the textbook is used, it is tried out, like they did. Professor Gokhale and his team went to colleges and saw how it is, how it works, whether it works or not, and how well or what changes are needed. The second is while use. During the use, it can also be evaluated. So this requires more of a observation kind of study. So this kind of studies are especially lacking. You go and find out what is actually happening, what is working when the learners are using, and then you ask the learners also, the teachers also. So it is pre-uses, the book is yet to be published. uh, uh, During uses, the book is published, it is prescribed, it is being used by teachers and students, and then you conduct a study to find out how well it is working. And the last one is post use. You need to find out what has been the impact of that particular teaching materials on the learners, on the teachers, how effective it has been. Now, naturally, I was interested, and you will also be interested in finding out whether this kind of evaluation actually gets done. What I could find is that mostly it is pre-use kind of evaluation is done, but a longitudinal kind of study, looking at the situation for some years, like the book is prescribed for 3 years or 5 years. So what's happening, and when a learner learns through this particular textbook, how much of that part is assimilated after 2 or 3 years, that kind of studies are not done very frequently. So systematic evaluations of the popular materials, especially some books are more popular. So what happens with them? Why are they popular? Are they really useful? In the long term, is the success only because of advertisement and aggressive selling by the publishers, or is it actually worthwhile? This kind of studies are not easily available. Actual impact of different types of language learning materials, this is also not easily available. I'm saying easily available. I'm not saying that it is not done, because most of this research is done by publishers, and these publishers, the focus of the publisher is of course on making the materials popular, so that it becomes sellable and it has something different from others. And the focus is not on effect of these materials on the learners, or on language acquisition, or on what teachers feel about that. And even if this kind of research is done, it remains confidential because the publisher is doing it, and they do not want it to be known to the rivals. So there is huge scope for research here, and it's not just from the perspective of using this as a research area. I am saying it is very much essential. Teachers should know what kind of if you go to the market, you're going to find different series, at least 50 or 60 series from each publisher. So which one has been used, how what kind of effect it has had. You need to, if this kind of data was available, it will be very, very useful for the learners. It will also be useful for the textbook writers also. But our concern here is with the learners and the teachers. So what should be done? I feel the way ahead is we need more of this kind of empirically validated data, information about the actual effects of different kinds of textbooks, different kinds of materials. This kind of research has to be taken up by universities. Very few people take up. I'm so happy to see that there are some participants who are doing research on this. But when we compare the people who are doing research on materials production, they are always in a minority, even within the minority of people working in ELT. So this kind of research needs to be taken up, and especially in Shivaji University or Solapur University. The kind of research which is done on textbooks is comparing SSC board textbooks with NCERT or something like that. But what about the professional textbooks? This also needs to be done. Secondly, I feel that associations like English Teachers Association or LTI should take up these things. It's a very good thing that the organizers of this conference have taken up this important area. This is very, very timely and essential thing. And more such things should be done by bigger organizations like LTI. And maybe teams should be formed to work on this, to find out which kinds of materials are helpful, which kinds of materials should be more written in the same veins, more material should be produced. And all the three levels, the pre-use, while use, and post-use, this kind of research also needs to be taken up by individual researchers, institutes, universities, associations. And we need to get serious about materials production, because in the last two lectures also we have heard that this is textbook it forms sometimes the backbone of language learning. More teacher training workshops need to be organized. More training workshops for evaluators also need to be organized. So at least we have come to a position where teacher training, we have realized the importance of that, but we also need evaluators. So we need that kind of workshops. This webinar, I hope it becomes the first one. It starts the trend, and there should be many more coming up in this manner. So I'll end with this. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer if there are some questions.
Let me ask a teacher.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned teachers are more responsible and need to get more involved in text for writing, right? But I'm not so sure about, yes, you mentioned that teachers are more responsible and to get more involved in text for writing. Yes. And but I'm not so sure about the rules of researchers and teachers because some researchers are quite dogmatic about their results, while teachers are doing small informal surveys and the results are changeable. So what are the rules of researchers and teachers in designing a textbook?
No, I'm not saying that the researchers should design the textbooks. They should do research, find out what is working, what is not working. They should compare different kinds of textbooks, different kinds of materials produced, different approaches, maybe communicative approach and a task-based approach and so on. So I'm not saying that they should be producing the.
Thank you so much, teacher.
There is a question in the chat box.
So firstly, am I audible?
Yes, yes, teacher.
Yes. So firstly, thank you, Professor Tripti Karekati and all of the today's speakers for your excellent presentations, as all the speakers managed to deliver in a professional manner. So in this section, Professor Tripti has dealt with the topic on a textbook in a language classroom, depend on it or teach it, based on the questions such as why just a course book, who are the teaching materials, and pros and cons of textbooks, how is the process, how is the evaluation process, how much of evaluation actually gets done, and what can be done, etc. So let me add some points here. So in our own context, in Myanmar, textbooks are a key component in most language programs. So in some situations, they serve as the basis for much of the language input learners receive and the language practice that occurs in the classroom. So they may provide the basis for the content of the lessons and the balance of skills taught and the kinds of language practice the student take part in. So in other situations, the textbook may serve primarily to supplement the teacher's instruction. For learners, the textbook may provide the major source of contact they have with the language apart from input provided by the teacher. So according to my experience, in the case of inexperienced teachers, textbooks may also serve as a form of teacher training, and they provide ideas on how to plan and teach lessons as well as formats that teachers can use. So much of the language teaching that occurs throughout the world today could not take place without the extensive use of commercial textbooks. So learning how to use and adapt textbooks is hence an important part of a teacher's professional knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. The chat box asked the question, madam. The textbooks nowadays are learner-oriented and they also have blend of general topics along with the core text. Yet, students depend on a lot of market material. What can be done to attract their attention towards authentic resources? This has been asked by Dr. Manoj Sadali, sir.
Professor, please unmute yourself.
Hello, Karikatti madam. Can you please unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now yes.
Yeah. All right. So I feel I tried to talk on this very question. Teachers should enter this. They should be producing authentic teaching materials, and for this we need to have many more seminars of this kind, webinars, and then training sessions. So without training, nothing will be achieved, and that should be the right way to go.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the participants?
I think there is one more question by Dr. Leena Jadhav. Can you suggest some courses in textbook production? There are, of course, many such courses, and because of the open courses now, we have access to the best teachers from Europe and America also teaching us. But the best one closest to us, I would suggest it would be IFLU's courses. Even PGCT, PGDT courses also have very good components on this part.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for your responses to the participants. Professor Trupti Karikatti, ma'am, has started with international scene in the textbook production, and then also given the idea of in the India, and she also talked about from the different perspectives, from the different vantage points, like from the reader's point of view, from the author producer's point of view, again the textbook practitioner, that is teacher's point of view. As much of the review is taken by one of the participants, that is Nini. So instead of repeating all these things, I just thank Professor Trupti Karikatti for her insightful lecture. And now I invite Honorable Chairperson of this session, Professor Rajaram Jirange, sir, for his presidential remarks. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah. Professor Trupti Karikatti has given a very comprehensive view of the textbook as such. However, I would like to draw the attention of the academicians, the scholars, the textbook writers towards the 2020 new education policy, which has changed the view of total higher education, and they have brought certain principles in teaching learning process. And University Grants Commission is trying to change their perspective also, and in last few years they have started to go for learning outcome based curriculum framework. So see, now the shift of focus is on the learners. Learner centric things are coming into the education. So this is one of the most important points to be taken into consideration while preparing the text. The second thing I would like to add here, or just for the discussion or for thinking, while preparing text, we should take into account the learning outcome based curriculum frameworks principles, and we have to map those things at the time of evaluation, and that will give the valuation of the textbook also. Again, another point I would like to add here, that while preparing the textbook, you must have come across the concept of Bloom's taxonomy. The revised Bloom's taxonomy should be taken into consideration while preparing or creating the textbook on 6 parameters. Likewise, say, remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So the gradation of the units in the textbook should be in the same sequence, and these things must be evaluated, or in other words, it is said that mapping of these things in the examination. So overall, if you evaluate only textbook, it will be just like, you may say, that the principle. While you apply that textbook to the classroom, when the teacher delivers that textbook to the students, and what is the ultimate outcome of it, the whole thing, we cannot think that textbook as a separate entity. We have to think of the textbook in the context of all these things. And the most important thing now, it is getting changed, that the focus of the whole teaching learning process is changing or going towards the learner's outcome. Means when you teach that text to the learner, what you say, before that, let me clarify that objectives of teaching are different from the learning outcome. So you should think of the learning outcomes, and that will happen only after the evaluation of the student or the learner. Once the learners gets the outcomes which are expected through the learning of the textbook, then we can think of that textbook is useful. So taking into account all these things, see, actually what Professor Karikatti has explained about the textbook, those are the basic essential ideas to frame or to create the textbook. But while creating the content of the textbook, a textbook writer or the creator should take into account all these things, and then think of selecting the text or selecting the unit or whatever it may be. So with this, I conclude my remark. I thank the organizing committee or the college Amdar Shashikant Shinde for creating the space for the teachers to discuss on this pertinent issue, and I hope that this should be the beginning of the chapter or the discussion, and it will come up with some fruitful ideas or fruitful creations in the field of academics. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Rajaram Jhangi, sir, for concluding Tripti Karikati's excellent lecture on textbook in a language class. Depend on it or ditch it. Now I would like to request Dr. Sarang Shinde, my friend, to propose a vote of thanks of this concluding session. Dr. Sarang Shinde.
Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone, to the one and all present here virtually. And it is such a privilege for me to get this opportunity to propose vote of thanks for the day one of this virtual two-day national conference on the theme Place of Textbook in English Language Teaching in India, a dependable tool of knowledge transfer. So on behalf of this organizing committee, Department of English, Amdar Shashikant Shinde Mahavidyalay Medha, I'm here to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the esteemed delegates present virtually for this online conference for their gracious presence and active participation to make this conference a grand success. To begin with, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor S. Mohanraj, sir, for taking out his precious time from his busy schedule and accepting our invitation to deliver a keynote address over here. Thank you, Mohanraj, sir. And yours was a very scholarly talk on the topic textbook as a common man sees it, which must have ignited an insight in many participants who have witnessed your scholarly talk. So again, I also extend my gratitude to Dr. Sunil Sawant, sir, President, Satara Chapter LTI, for patronizing this conference and letting the idea of the conference into reality. Thank you, sir, for doing this. I must thank Professor Sridhar Gokhale, sir, for accepting the invitation as a resource person for the day one and for delivering such a resourceful talk, the topic, the textbook and the learner. I also take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dr. Tripti Karikati ma'am for delivering such a wonderful talk on textbook in a language class, depend it or ditch it. And I also thank Professor Rajaram Jhangi sir and Dr. Ashok Parande sir for accepting invitation as chairpersons for 2 sessions respectively for this day one. And how can I forget to thank
due to heavy rain, the connectivity problem might be there. Thank you, Sarang Shinde, for proposing vote of thanks.
Yes, let us conclude.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much for attending the day one.
Yes, this is the problem in the virtual conferences. There are certain things which are not in our hands. Respectively, I was about to discuss all the things and all the members who have actively participated for the success of this conference. I should not miss to include the names Dr. Arvind Jadhav and Mr. Srinivas for comparing for the whole day, and also Mr. Vijay Ghadge, Dr. Satish Saikar, Dr. Prashant Lohar, Mr. Suryakanta Date, Dr. Tanaji Kambre, and all the active members of Satara Chapter LTI for giving the necessary and very important assistance for the functioning of this conference. And I also thank all the participants from the different states of India and also participants who have joined from Myanmar and Thailand. See, basically this, we had entitled this as a national conference, but with the inclusion of the delegates from Myanmar and Thailand, technically ours is now, it's an international conference, we could say technically. And so I thank once again for their active participation and all the faculty members from my college for working hard for the past few days to make this conference a successful one. So by this note, let me declare the prior permission of the authority that all the sessions for today is over, and let us meet virtually tomorrow for paper presentation sharp at 10 a.m. So there is one note from the organizing committee that you all the paper presenters shall get a detailed schedule of paper presentation shortly. So you just stick to the kind of communication which we'll be having in the coming time. So thank you one and all for we will be providing the link also. So stay tuned, stay updated. Thank you very much.